So you probably read the title. Yeah, it's over 40 commanders. Now, this is just a compilation video of all of my unique and fun deck ideas. Don't click off if you already watched all those, because at the beginning of this video, right off the bat, we've got 3 brand new deck ideas, okay? So there is some new content here for you guys, and for people that are just joining the channel. Some of these videos, when I made them, we were sitting at like 600, 700 subscribers. So, you know, I thought maybe I'd re-release these, just so you guys could get a taste of how my old editing style was. Be thankful for my new editing style, because some of this stuff is rough. Some of it I actually really like. There's a couple of things that I used to do that I'm actually going to bring back. Pull up a chair, grab a snack, make an entire pizza, get a huge gallon of something, because we got a lot of decks to cover, and I'm sure one of these are going to inspire some creativity. Let's start things off, though, with 3 brand new decks. The first being BELLO, Bard of the Brambles. And the deck is called Under This Room is the Garage. BELLO is 1 a red and a green for a 3/3. During your turn, each non-equipment artifact and non-aura enchantment you control with mana value 4 or greater is a 4/4 elemental creature. In addition to its other types, it has indestructible, haste, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. Right off the bat, Big Raccoon strong. Big Raccoon animate desk lamp and smack face. So, you're asking yourself, Nick, where's the unique idea here? You run all the good value artifacts and enchantments. You bash face because they're also creatures. There you go. You're pretty damn close. You're pretty damn close. What my brain came up with, though, is amazing. So, honestly, I bought one of these over the last weekend, a BELLO, because I really was interested in building a BELLO deck. I have a rough draft of the deck sitting over here on my desk right now. I've been enjoying it. I ran a single card in that deck that made me go, wait a second. So in the deck, I run Charred Foyer because it's a 4-drop enchantment that gives me pseudo card draw at the end of my turn. It's really nice. And then it turns into a way to cast giant spells for free, which in a deck where we're running 4 CMC or higher is really good. But then I started asking myself, do these work the same way as split cards do? You know, like, do they combine the mana cost into 1 total mana cost? Because if they do, this gets gross with BELLO. And they do. Rooms work like split cards. They combine both mana cost of both sides to make the total CMC. So this is actually a 10-drop card. And every room ever printed is greater than 4 CMC when you combine both sides. So you can put every room in this deck. And, yeah. So stuff like Painter's Studio and Defaced Gallery is insane, because you can just play Defaced Gallery for 2 mana. And you just played a 2 mana enchantment that somehow still works on BELLO. So you can play like you're a real estate agent and show them every room of the house while you bash their face with it. Now listen, I know some of you are guys. The rooms in this house aren't gonna sell it for you. You know, you're gonna be like, yeah, sure, it's got a nice island in the kitchen, but where can Daddy park his toys? Well, Daddy doesn't need any toys because the garage is downstairs. Vehicles aren't creatures, are they? They're not. They're just artifacts. So if you run vehicles that are 4 or greater CMC, BELLO will immediately turn them on. Asika's Chariot? Yeah, 4 for a 4/4 that spits out 2 2/2s that copies your tokens when it attacks. No need to crew. Nautiloid Ship? Yeah, I'm gonna snag your whole graveyard. Again, no need to crew and just start casting the best stuff out of it. The best part about this deck, hands down, if you watched my favorite WinCons video, this deck is amazing for Dragonhawk. Oh my god, is it good for Dragonhawk, because all the elementals are 4/4s, so Dragonhawk just triggers for days. I just played my first test game with this deck the other day. I got Dragonhawk to go off for 12, so I was like, hey, that could win a game. I'm cool with that. Speaking of which, in this deck, Omnath Locust of Rage, turning all our elementals that die into 3/3s because, you know, BELLO's turning all of our artifacts and enchantments with greater CMC than 4 into elementals. And then finally, we got like Tamir Sabertooth in the deck, so we can keep blinking Dragonhawks. We can keep blinking like Endray's Forerunners to keep doing that. Keep blinking our Surge Hacker mech back to our hand so we can play it and just destroy all the biggest stuff in play over and over and over and over and over again. The deck looks incredibly strong, I'm not gonna lie, with all the brand new rooms that came out, a ton of good vehicles, and I'm sure a ton of new, very good vehicles for this deck coming out in Aether Drift. Don't worry, we're going to be doing a full in-depth deck tech on this deck at some point because it's going to be in my personal collection. I really like it. I do have mock-ups for entire like rough drafts of these decks down in the description, so if you want to check this one out, see what some of the meat on the bones is here, feel free. But with that, we'll move on to deck idea number 2. Deck idea number 2 is dirty and mean, and I'm not going to lie, but I know some of you guys like dirty and mean stuff, so this is as casual as you can be while being still dirty and mean. The deck is built around Child of Alara. Child of Alara is a white, a blue, black, red, green for a 6/6 with trample. When it dies, destroy all non-land permanents. They can't be regenerated. So with this deck normally, you run 5-color good stuff. And if anybody gets out of whack, you wipe the board. You run some sack outlets so you can wipe the board with Child, a little bit of recursion so you can get back your good stuff. Rinse and repeat. You pretty much can keep any deck that's not really a combo deck off the board. So, you know, that's nice. That's sweet. What I did was plug this into something I've been wanting to do for a while. So with the release of Outlaws of Thunder Junction, we got the plot mechanic where you can pay an alternate cost to cast the spell for free later on. When I saw this mechanic, I immediately thought, oh, what if you board wiped right before playing a bunch of creatures? And then I just plugged that into Child because Child's 5-color. You can run all the plot cards. It's actually pretty disgusting. So for instance, you plot an Outcast Trailblazer. You go, I'm going to play this on a future turn, Pilgrim. Next turn, you know, cast a piece of removal if they're getting a little out of hand. Then you go, I'm going to plot my Beastbound Outcast. You go ahead, comes back to you. I'm going to plot my Step Between Worlds. Then I'm going to sacrifice my Child of Alara to my Village Rites, wipe the board, cast these 3 plotted spells for free. Now this alone is just cool to me. I like it. You just run a bunch of removal so you can deal with anything if it gets too out of hand, and you just plot stuff. You plot, you plot, you plot, you plot. If anyone deals with your commander, that's fine. They wipe the board, you play all your plot stuff. If they don't deal with your commander, you plot, you plot, you plot, you plot. They just keep letting us plot, and we eventually drop one of these cards and absolutely ruin their day. Something like a Memory Worm to deal 2 damage every time we cast something that's not from our hand. Or Nofeshni, which copies everything we cast from exile. Gross. And my favorite, Flaming Tyrannosaurus. Deal 3 damage every time we cast something from anywhere other than our hand, which when you have 3, 4, 5 things plotted, yeah, it'll definitely, end a game. You're pretty much immediately turning on a clock for the opponents, and you're like, hey, one of these ways, I'm gonna try to be bringing home the game. Oh, and did you think I was done? Of course, there's also Storm cards in here. Grape Shot, deal 1 damage, Storm, we got it. Mind's Desire, shuffle your deck, play some free Storm, we got it. Haze of Rage, because our commander has Trample, and, why not? Yeah, we got it. We also run 6 board wipes because, that's a big part of what we're doing here. Again, a rough draft of the deck list is down below if you guys are wanting to check it out. And with that, let's move into deck number 3. Deck number 3 is based around SHAY Cormac, and it's called Now Strip. SHAY Cormac is a black and a white for a 1/1. You can pay 1, permanents your opponent's control, lose hexproof, indestructible, protection, shroud, and ward until end of turn. Whenever a creature an opponent controls becomes the target of a spell or ability you control, put a bounty counter on it. Whenever a creature with a bounty counter on it dies, put 2 1/1 counters on Cormac. So cool. We got a little commander that can strip other people of all of their protection and slowly gets bigger over time. You know, pretty good little unit for 2 mana. I really leaned into the stripping opponent stuff for stuff. I think that's just interesting. So this deck is all about just stripping your opponent's creatures down to the bare minimum so that our creatures can just, outvalue them. First off, the deck runs stuff like Crawl Space and Ghostly Prison because we're stripping their creatures of everything, including the ability to attack. We can also control the size of other people's boards with stuff like Sudden Spoiling to make things 0/2s until end of turn with no abilities on the opponent's side. Always good. Or something like Carevek to give other creatures -1/-1 to cut all their creatures down a size. Or one of my personal favorites in the deck, Curse of Conformity for 5 mana enchant player. That enchant player's creatures become 3/3s. Outside of the size matters category of being able to control creatures' power and toughness, we've also got other cards that'll cause the opponent's creatures to strip. Kaya, Bane of the Dead is a 6-drop planeswalker that provides 2 pieces of removal with 7 loyalty and 2 -3s that can exile target creature, but it has a passive that makes your opponents and permanents your opponents control with hexproof be able to be targeted as though they didn't have hexproof. So yeah, no more hexproof. Speaking of no more hexproof, Glaring Spotlight is a 1-drop artifact that will strip all your opponent's creatures of hexproof. You can also crack it to give your creatures hexproof, and they can't be blocked until end of turn, which when you have a commander, that gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Glaring Spotlight's very good. And of course, we've also got Detection Tower, a land that you can pay 1 and tap it to make your opponent's creatures lose hexproof. So yeah, a lot of hexproof hate. As far as winning the game in this deck, outside of just our creatures most of the time being bigger than their creatures, I really like Funeral Room, just dealing damage to people for playing said creatures. So it's like a damned if you do, damned if you don't sitch for the other person. You can also turn into Awakening Hall, which brings back all your creatures from grave, which, of course is good. The deck does run quite a bit of removal, and the fact that it can give whole boards -1/-1 with stuff like Korvek. I think a lot of utility creatures might die, so stuff like Lorcan Warlock Collector could be really good, which lets you pay life for any creature that goes into opponent's graveyards to come into play under our control. Damn. Holy sh**. Could have sneezed up a storm. Lorcan can steal a bunch of little utility stuff for it going to grave. I think it's good in here. And then Corpse Knight and Suture Priest are just 2 cards that I absolutely love running. They drain people for either our stuff entering, their stuff entering. Suture Priest gains us life for our stuff entering, makes them lose for their stuff. they're just really good. I've found that in games, especially in casual games of Commander, they're very good cards. Again, if this deck interests you, I have a rough draft of the deck list down in the description if you want to go check that out.
TESAK Judith's Hellhound. TESAK is 3 in a red for a 3/3 elemental dog with Unleash. If you don't know what Unleash is, one, very well named for a dog card, Unleash. You may have this creature enter the battlefield with a 1/1 counter on it. It can't block as long as it has a 1/1 counter on it. Other dogs you control have Unleash. Creatures you control with counters on them have Haste. Whenever TESAK Judith's Hellhound attacks, add 1 red for each attacking creature. This is cool, right? Like, I know your first thought's like, yeah, you just run Burgy, though. You know what I mean? You just run another big mana commander. But it's not dogs. But do it be dogs? I don't think it is. I don't think it do be. Does it unleash dogs? How flavorful is that? Honestly, I'm obsessed with that. I think that's really cool. I like this thing a lot, actually. This thing gives your dogs, like, stacked up stats and then gives you a ton of mana to spam out more dogs. You're just, like, sending the pack after them. And then I sick my pack of ghouls on. Yeah, tight vibes with her. It seems really good. Yeah, she just seems great. So the whole thing is you're just flooding the board with dogs. You're bashing face with dogs that are unleashed now. They have haste. They have 1/1 counters. And then you're adding a ton of mana with TESAK to either play huge instants, because that mana is going to leave during your post-combat main, so you have to use it during combat, to either activate abilities on creatures or artifacts or enchantments you control, or to cast instants with all that mana, which is really, really cool. Yeah, she's just cool. So if we want to get into the deck, I think the first thing to start with, obviously, is the dogs. There's just a lot of dogs, and the cheaper the dog, the better. So, like, 1-drops and 2-drops are really good. In terms of 1-drops, we've got, like, a KUON Hellhound and Goldhound. Those are the, like, 2 only 1-drop dogs, which is, you know, fine. I'm sure there's a couple more, but they just, like, were pretty much unplayable. There's a lot more 2-drop hounds with stuff like Ashmouth Hound, Ashmouth Hound, Chandra's Magmut, Firebelly Changeling. Changeling counts as a hound. That's useful in here. Immolator Soul Eater, Metallic Mimic counts as a hound. Yeah, there's a lot of 2-drops in here that are great. Even 3-drops, like, we can pretty much go up all the way to 3. There's like 2 4-drop hounds just because they're really good. But we pretty much go up to 3 because you can play it the turn before TESAK comes out. And there's a lot of really good 3-drop stuff you can run, like Adaptive Automaton. Kamanu Battle Armor is a 3-drop hound. It's, like, super good, too. You can just equip it to other hounds, which is nice. Terrene Mauler is another changeling that gets 1/1 counters, counts as a hound, 3-drop. Sure, why not? Yeah, you just pretty much flood the board with all these hounds. We run a total of 17 of them. And then you play TESAK so that you can have a ton of unleashed hounds a ton of unleashed dogs in play. And then those dogs bash face. And then TESAK's going to add us a ton of red mana that we can only use during combat, so we need ways to use that mana. So I think that's probably the best place to go next. Ways to use that mana. So there's a couple combat tricks that are really good in here. There's Lunar Frenzy, and then there's, what's the other one called? Balduvian Rage, yes. They're both instant speed, X and a red, and it gives a creature +X/+O. So whichever hound gets through, you can use all your mana from TESAK to pump that hound up. Huge bash face. It's actually really good. It seems like it keeps the foot on their neck for most of the game. You could also go the route of, like, fireballs. You could go with stuff like Comet Storm, Electro Dominance, Fall of the Titans, which are all, like, instant speed fireballs to dump all that mana into. After your dogs hit, they might be fairly low. You actually might be able to take some people out with fireballs. It actually seems like a really good line of play to do. There's also a way more niche option. There's also extra combats that you can do during combat that are instant speed, or you can just activate. There's Great Train Heist from Thunder Junction, which is fantastic. Instant speed, extra combat, exactly what we're looking for in this deck. There's also, what is the other one here? Savage Beating. That's what it is. Savage Beating is another instant speed, extra combat that we can play off of TESAK's mana and get more combats with the hounds. Those hounds, that next combat will add us more mana. We might be able to just fireball after that. You know what I mean? It seems like you can have really explosive plays with this, which I like. And then there's one way, like a super specific card. Embercleave is a flash and equipment that equips and gives the creature 1/1 double strike trample. So again, this is way more niche, but it kind of acts as a combat trick on an equipment. So you can use her mana to flash and Embercleave, equipped it to her or one of the hounds. Bash face. Again, a really cool line of play there again. We do run like a little combat buff package just because I think with the amount of dogs we're going to have in play, it just makes sense. Goblin War Drums gives all your stuff menace. That just seems good. Shared Animosity gives a creature +1/+0 for each other creature attacking with the same type. In this deck, insane. Uncivil Unrest is 4 and a red for an enchantment. Non-token creatures have Riot. And then if a creature you control with a 1/1 counter on it deals damage, it does double that damage. Yes, in this deck, this card's might be one of the best cards in here. And then we've got War Cadence, which is X and a red. Creatures can't block this turn unless their controller pays X for each blocking creature. Again, you can dump all of the TESAK mana into this and just make it so nothing can block. Another very cool line of play in the deck. And outside of that, we have one more little group just because TESAK lets your dogs unleash. I thought that was so flavorful. I had to throw in a collars package. So we've got Avacyn's Collar, Basilisk Collar, Sparring Collar. Collar your dogs up and then unleash them and then fuck your opponents up. You know, I think that's the name of the game here. I think this one's really cool, actually. Never seen it. Dogs, dogs, dogs. Have a fun one. Let's go to the next one. Up next, this one's going to be a little bit faster just because the strategy's nothing new. We've all heard of like aristocrat strategies, but there is a couple things in here that makes it like a unique type of aristocrat strategy that I thought was really cool and I wanted to talk about. Also, Commander, never seen it. Next, we've got KUON, Ogre Ascendant, which flips into KUON's Essence. Which is a legendary enchantment, so your commander might be a little bit more difficult to get rid of once it flips, which I think is really, really cool, or turns, whatever you call these ones. But yeah, his whole thing is he's 3 black for a 2/4. At the end of your turn, if 3 or more creatures died this turn, if 3 or more creatures were put into the graveyard this turn, you flip him, and then when he's flipped, he's an enchantment that makes each player sack a creature on their upkeep. Pretty straightforward, but I think it's really good, actually. It comes out very quickly. It's very easy in a 4-player game to get 3 creatures to die. And then once it flips, it's an enchantment, which is way harder to get rid of than a creature. And it starts just guaranteeing aristocrat triggers on everyone's turn. I think it's actually really good. I like it. I think a good place to start here is we are trying to get 3 creatures to die pretty much the turn or the turn after KUON comes into play so that we can get him to flip as early as possible. The easiest way to do that is Edict effects, which are effects that make all players or all opponents sack a creature. So we run stuff like Innocent Blood. Innocent Blood's a 1 black, each player sacks a creature, which can easily turn on KUON very quickly. Soul Shatter, Shieldred's Edict, stuff like that will just make everyone sack something, which will be 3 creatures very easily. But the best ones for sure are the Sack Boys. Stuff like Fleshbag Marauder, Demon's Disciple, Gravelighter, Merciless Executioner, Plaguecrafter. They're all creatures that when they enter make everyone sack, so you can sack the creature that just entered. Everyone else sacks. That's 4 creatures that died. KUON flips very quickly. These are probably the best ones in the deck to get him to flip. But then when he's flipped, what's the game plan? It's very normal. Bastion of Remembrance, Blood Artist, Falcon Wrath Noble, Zulaport Cutthroat, stuff like that to drain people whenever they sack or whenever creatures die. I know what you're saying. You're saying a lot of these trigger on when our stuff dies, and you are right. And that's why we have a package that I'm calling like KUON's Offering. That guarantees us 1 token that we can sack to KUON and get death triggers with. So we've got stuff like Bitter Blossom, Black Market Connections, Breeding Pit, Ophiomancer, stuff that's going to guarantee give us a 1/1, or stuff that's going to guarantee give us tokens that we can sack and get death triggers with. They're very, very good. There's also some stuff like Bloodghast and Reassembling Skeleton, which will be just like essentially acting as a token. They just keep coming back and we can keep cracking them to the KUON sacrifice, keep getting death triggers on our side, trigger our Grave Pack, trigger our Butcher of Malakars so that everyone else sacks, and just keep those things going. And at this point, our commander's an enchantment, way harder to get rid of. We've also just got some sack outlets. If our commander's not in play, we still want this engine to be firing off. So we've got Altar Dementia, Ashnod's Altar, Spawning Pit, Viscera Seer, and Woe Strider. Just like the classic sack outlets that you could have. But yeah, along with all the tokens that are going to be coming into play, all of the death triggers and draining, we've also got Exsanguinate and Grey Merchant of Asphodel, just to like potentially try to end the game. So yeah, this one's more straightforward than the other one, but I have never seen this guy before, and it seems like a very powerful aristocrat deck. So yeah, if you want to look at the list, check it out down below. And with that, we're moving on to the 3rd and final deck of the video. The next one is VNNIFAR Evolved Enigma. I'm not even going to like hype it up and do some big like announcement. I don't know how I didn't see this card. I've looked through the spoilers multiple times. It's not an art thing either. I looked at all 3 versions of her art. I've never, ever seen this card. I literally didn't see it when it came out. I have no idea how. Very confused. I went back through it and I was like, she looks familiar. And then I started reading and I was like, no, she's just Simic. And then I was like, oh, VNNIFAR's the name of the Prime Speaker as well. That's probably where I've seen that name before. Yeah, she's just sick. She's very, very cool. She's 2 a green and a blue. For a 3/4, at the beginning of combat on your turn, choose one. You can either cloak a card from your hand or put a 1/1 counter on each colorless creature you control. Now, to cloak a card is to put a card face down on your side. It's a 2/2 colorless creature, and I think it has Ward 1. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure it's Ward 1. And then if it's a creature, you can pay its mana cost to flip it. But what I didn't know was that if it's any kind of permanent at all and you blink it, it'll come back into play as that permanent. So that's just what we're doing, you know, that's just what we're doing. The 1/1 counters on each colorless creature you control, we're going to utilize that a couple times just to get like card draw or some kind of effect. Mainly we're going to be doing the Cloak card because, wow, that's good. That's insane. So weirdly enough, I think the best place to start on this one is the most exciting place, which is normally not how I work, but on this one, I think that's the case. So I call the category Big Blink Flips. I have no idea what else to call it. So these are the cards that we're trying to cloak out of our hand with VNNIFAR, and then we're trying to blink so that they come in for free. So we'll just go down the list and talk about them because I think it's just a really cool deck. I think the idea is cool, and I think it's something that I might be able to sell you guys on here. So, Day of the Dragons. Let's look at this one. 4 and 3 blue for an enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, exile all creatures you control, then create that many 5/5 red dragon creature tokens with flying. When Day of the Dragon leaves the battlefield, sacrifice all dragons and return all the exiled cards back into play. So all of our huge cloaked permanents that we're trying to cheat into play get exiled and get replaced with 5/5 red dragons with flying. And then if someone deals with Day of the Dragon, we get to cheat the big permanents into play anyway? Oh, okay. Might be one of the best ones to cheat into play. It's doing quite literally everything we want to do. So, yeah. Kiora Best the Sea God. Let's say you turn 3 VNNIFAR, okay? Then you go to combat, and then you Kiora Best the Sea God. You go ahead and cloak that as a 2/2, okay? Comes back around. Yeah, I think I'm gonna blink. I'm gonna blink my 2/2 and get a Kiora Best the Sea God on turn 4. How about a 1 with the multiverse on turn 4? 6 and 2 blue for an enchantment. You may look at the top card of your library anytime. You may play land cards and cast cards from the top of your library. Once during your turn, you may play a spell for free. Oh, and with all these big spells, that one's good. That one's real good. Throw an Omniscience in here if you're just like sickening. Railway Brawler, okay? We cloak him in turn 3. Turn 4, we flip him. He's a 5/5 reach, trample. Creatures enter the battlefield with X/1/1 counters on them, where X is its power. So all those dragons are going to enter as 10/10s from Day of the Dragon. Oh, yeah. All of our creatures are going to double in power when they enter. Yes, all from turn 4 on. Sure. That seems extraordinarily good. We've also got Ruxa, Patient Professor, because all of our cloaked creatures count as creatures with no abilities, so they're actually going to be 3/3s, and they're also going to be unblockable, which is another line of play to just smoke the opponents. You could also have like 4 cloaked creatures or 4 cloaked things and have one of them be a Ruxa and then swing and then uncloak the Ruxa and then give all the other ones a 1/1 and unblock. It's just cool. There's like cool lines of play in this. Sandworm Convergence, 6 and 2 green. Creatures without flying can't attack you or planeswalkers you control. And then at the beginning of your end step, you create a 5/5 worm. Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll get that on turn 4. I think it's probably fine turn 4. So, you probably are sold. I know I was at this point. I was like, this is very cool. I like this a lot. But then he asked the question, we need blink. Is there enough blink outside of white to be blinking all this stuff? I didn't think so, but I don't play blue blink a lot. There's a lot of blue blink. A ton of blue blink. We've got Blur, Conjurer's Closet, Displace, Displacer Kitten, Essence Flux, Ghostly Flicker, Golden Argosy, Illusionist Stratagem, Maneldor, Swift Savior, Planner Incision, Siren's Ruse, Teferi's Time Twister, Thoughts of Deep Dwelling. There's a ton of stuff that blinks in blue, like an absolute shit ton. And they're all going to be cheating these things into play for free. And you're in green-blue. So have fun keeping a full hand with just all the insane card draw you can run. Armorcraft Judge. Yeah. Inspiring Call. Yeah, I think I might do that. Prime Speaker Zagana. Just cheat one of those into play. Draw a quick 4-ski. And then start blinking her. Oh, geez. Yeah, that's really good. The deck seems insane. We've also got some face-down interaction in the deck, just because you're going to be playing a lot of cloaked creatures, you might as well. Deathmist Raptor is just a 3/3 Death Touch that'll keep coming back as long as we're flipping cloaked creatures. Very good blocker, like extremely annoying. Hide in Plain Sight is like another extremely cool one. 3 and a green for a sorcery. Look at the top 5 cards of your library. Cloak 2 of them. Oh, it gets Ward 2. Sorry, my ADD brain. I just read ahead. It gets Ward 2 when they're cloaked. That's really good. And then put the rest on the bottom in any order. Yeah, we'll go ahead and look at our top 5. We'll put 2 of those huge blink flip cards we were talking about, any of them, face down. And then we'll go ahead and blink them the next turn and get 2 giant things cheated into play for free. Ixidor, Yeah, go ahead and pay 2 and a blue to just turn face down, things face up. Yeah, it says face down creature. It only cares that the face down aspect of it's a creature. If the other side's a permanent, you lucked out big time. Scroll of Fate, go ahead and start manifesting all the cards in your hand so you can blink them. Eudora, any of your stuff dies, it comes back flipped as a forest. Wait, comes back what as a forest? Face down as a forest? Huh. Can you blink that? Yes, you can. Yes, you can. This deck seems very good.
SISAY Weatherlight Captain Toolbox Partner Control deck? I don't know. SISAY is 2 and a white for a 2/2 human soldier. She gets +1/+1 for each color among legendary permanents you control. You can also pay all 5 colors to search your library for a legendary permanent that has less mana value than her power and put that card onto the battlefield. So, the name of the game normally is to get her to a 7/7, tutor out bombs, and win the game with those bombs. But nah. We don't play decks how they're supposed to be played. You clearly have never visited my channel, and while we're on it, go ahead and subscribe if you're not. Good. Alright, our SISAY build is based around the partner commanders. And not those ones. No. Not the good ones. Get out of here. Yeah, those ones. We run those ones. We run the partner commanders that partner specifically with other cards. For example, Kazur Ruthless Stalker pairs with Akuma Stalking Shadows, which means when one of those enters the battlefield, you get to tutor the other one out of your deck into your hand. Yeah, this is extra good in SISAY because you add 2 colors to her +1/+1 ability by tutoring up Akima, and just doing that adds a 3rd color with Kazur into your hand, passively providing card advantage on top of her ability already being a busted tutor ability. Need some cards in your hand and bodies on the board? Search for Krav and Regna. Need some pseudo removal and big boy bodies? Search for Timon and Rada. Need some card draw? Search for Zitter Split and Okun. I have no idea how you pronounce either one of those. I gave it my best shot. Value central over here. Keep a full hand and a whole lot of answers in this one. Next we've got Ryan, Angel of Rebirth, Voltron Protection Tribal. The Angel of Aegis, the tri-colored Trojan, if you will. Ryan is 2 a red, a green, and a white for a 5/4 angel with flying. Other multicolored creatures you control get +1/+0. We don't really care about that. More importantly, whenever a multicolored creature you control dies, return it to your hand at the end of turn. This deck is a Voltron deck based around buffing up Ryan as big as possible and winning with commander damage. Of course, it runs the Voltron classics like Commander's Play, Mother of Ruins, the Swords. We all know these. Where this deck gets spicy is cards like SAFFI, Luxodon Hierarch, or Dauntless Escort to keep him alive every turn, because they'll just come back to our hand at the end of turn to use all over again. Throwing cards like Quasali Pridemate, Goblin Legionnaire, and Elvish Hex Hunter for reusable removal, and you're keeping that Ryan safe as hell while angelically sending your opponents to the great beyond. Also Spark Trooper and Brian Stoutarm. I didn't know where to throw these in, but need I say more? I needn't. And lastly, what you've all been waiting for. Dragons! Sneak Attack Dragon Bounce. Yeah, that one probably needs an explanation. The commander of this deck is ZIRILAN of the Claw. ZIRILAN is 3 and 2 red for a 3/4 legendary Vishino, with the ability to pay 1 and 2 red tap to search your library for a dragon card and put it directly into play. It gains haste, exile it at the end of turn. So it's a sneak attack for dragons out of your deck. And wait a second, that's weird. This card doesn't have the stipulation of exiling the creature when it leaves play. That'll come in handy later. Run the classics like Crucible of Fire and Dragon Tempest, and then cards like Dragonlord Serpent for your early game utility dragons like Terror of the Peaks or Thunderbeak Regent, and use your commander ZIRILAN's ability late game to cheat in huge beaters like Ancient Copper Dragon and Chiss Gori of Forge Tyrant to bash the game into a victory. Add cards like 1000-Year Elixir to reuse your commander's ability, and give him pseudo haste to activate this ability on the turn he is played. Other haste enablers are just good in this deck, so throw some of those in there as well. Then add cards like Warstorm Surge into the mix to maximize damage output, and then exile those dragons at the end of turn. Right? Wrong. Bitch, Erratic Portal and Decoction Module are the deck's MVPs, allowing us to bounce those dragons back to our hand before the end step. Yeah, they didn't word this card correctly, so we can use them all again later. You like dragons? How about dragon knees? But anyway, Archelos Lagoon Mystic as a Voltron commander. Archelos is 1 a blue, black, and a green for a 2/4 turtle. If he's tapped, permanents enter tapped. If he's untapped, permanents enter untapped. So naturally, we'll run the Voltron buff classics like Black Blade Reforged, Commander's Plate, and of course, all the swords we can get our hands on, and ways to protect him like Swiftfoot Boots, Sylvan Safekeeper, or Champion's Helm. But here's where it gets spicy. With Archelos, we can determine how our opponent's permanents enter the battlefield, so being able to tap or untap him at a whim is essential. Cards like Freed from the Real, Second Wind, and Moonsnare Prototype will let us have control over what's tapped. Next, of course, the deck's namesake. Cards like Sleep, Cone of Cold, and Icy Blast will add to the theme of clearing out blockers so our big turtle can get through. But the cherry on top are cards like Dream Tides, Exhaustion, and Misstep. These cards will keep our opponent's creatures tapped, guaranteeing us future swings. And since we attacked with Archelos, all their new stuff will enter tapped as well. Slow and steady,
Yeah, I don't think so with this guy. Up next is Baba Lysaga, Man Lands Matter. Baba Lysaga is 1 black-green for a 3/3 human warlock. Tapper, sacrifice up to 3 permanents. If there were 3 different permanent types among those permanents, each opponent loses 3, you gain 3, and you draw 3. So if you know me, you know I love man lands. Any land that can turn itself into a creature is my jam. And with Baba Lysaga, a land creature hits 2 of her permanent types clause. Cards like Blinkmoth Nexus, Mishra's Workshop, and Dread Sanctuary hit all 3 of her permanent types, which is tons of value for sacking one thing. You can also animate the land, swing with it. If they don't block, they take the damage. If they block, you just sack it in response. Super tough. Throw some cards like Blood Artist, Morbid Opportunist, Avengers Zendikar, Crucible of Worlds, Runanap, Excavator, and you've got yourself a super interesting Man Lands Matter Aristocrat build. Oh yeah, also,
Do you come here by your own free will or by compulsion?
sorry, I actually have no idea what that was. And finally, we've got the deck that all of you clicked on for Mono Red Mill with KURKESH, Onaki Ogre. KURKESH is 2 and 2 red for a 4/3. Whenever you activate a non-mana ability of an artifact you control, you may pay 1 red. If you do, you copy that ability. So, first off, wheels. This will be a quick way to tear through everyone's deck at the table. Magus of the Wheel, Wheel of Fate, Reforge the Soul are all great options. Cards that benefit you from discarding are also good because you're going to be wheeled as well, so you might as well get some perks out of it. So cards like Surly Badgesaur, Braelen's Shark Rider, and Glinthorn Buccaneer will let you reap the benefits of having to discard your hand. Where this deck gets genuinely scary is when you pair KURKESH's ability with cards like Keening Stone, Sands of Delirium, Otherworld Atlas. Doubling any of these triggers after a couple wheels will wipe players off the board quick. Keening Stone to mill cards equal to the amount of cards in your graveyard. Copy it. I'm no math whiz, but you seem to be equal to dead as shit. And I don't know, throw Urbrask into the list. Fuck it.
Agrus cost is 3 and a white for a 3/4 vigilance. Whenever Agrus cost Eternal Soldier becomes the target of an ability that targets only it, you may pay 1 and a Boros. If you do, copy that ability for each other creature you control that ability could target. Each copy targets a different one of those creatures. One, this dude's just unique on his own, because like 9 times out of 10, this would say whenever it's the target of a spell. This one says ability, which makes it really fun and cool. So there's obviously some very powerful stuff you can do with this commander just as is. You can run stuff like Duelist Heritage to give it double strike, pay 1 in a Boros, give your whole board double strike, which seems, really good. Run stuff like Mother of Runes, give it protection from a color, pay 1 in a Boros, give your whole board protection from that color. You see where I'm going. But you plug in those brand new mercenary cards into the equation here, and honestly, we're going for more of a token strategy because 1, the mercenary tokens are tokens, so they're already going to be flooding the board, and 2, the mercenary tokens can buff Agrus cost, which can then buff other mercenaries, other tokens we have in play. I just feel like you can get kind of like elf ball-y almost, where everything's kind of pumping each other and you're just swinging face, which I like a lot. In terms of cards that make these mercenary tokens, there's 9 playable ones in this deck that are in the colors, and all of them are pretty good. They're honestly all definitely runnable in a mid to high tier or a mid to high power deck. We'll talk about a few of the highlight ones. Angelic Sellsword is fantastic, 4 and a white for a 4/4 Angel Mercenary, flying vigilance. When it or another non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, you create a 1/1 red mercenary token with tap, give target creature +1/+0. Whenever it attacks, if its power is 6 or greater, draw a card. Yeah, this thing's making us mercenaries every time we play a creature. Very good in this deck. And it's drawing us a card if it's 6 or greater, which in this deck, it probably will be 6 or greater. Very good card, honestly. Angelic Sellsword just on its own, I think is a great card. In this deck, super good. Eartha Joe, Frontier Mentor, is just made for this dude, honestly. She's a 2/4. When she enters the battlefield, you create a 1/1 red mercenary. Whenever you activate an ability that targets a creature or player, copy that ability. You may choose new targets for the copy. In this deck, you're tapping mercenaries to give something +1/+0. You're activating your commander to give the whole board +1/+0. Eartha Joe's copying it. You can pay another 1 in a Boros to give your whole board another +1/+0. You're going big, honestly. You're swinging in for a lot here. We Ride at Dawn's actually kind of perfect for this. 2 and a white for an enchantment. Legendary creatures you control have Convoke. So our commander will come out way cheaper with all these tokens in play. And whenever your commander attacks, create a 1/1 red mercenary creature token with tap, give a creature +1/+0. So yeah, our commander's just producing those now. And that's when it attacks. So we can still, in response to it entering, activate the ability, double it with our commander. We're still attacking. Honestly, pretty good. And as you can see on screen, and if you want to check out the link below and like kind of read along with me while I'm talking about these decks, there's 6 more of these cards that produce mercenaries. Yeah, there's a good chunk of cards that can produce these mercenaries. When you pair them with Agrus cost, it's very, very good. We run anthems like Intangible Virtue, War Leader's Call, obviously, because we're going to be running all these tokens. We might as well be doing that. In terms of enders, we've got the classic Impact Tremors, because we're going to have so many tokens coming into play. And Nayali, which I actually didn't see this card. I don't think I've ever even saw that this released. It's very, very good. 2 a red and a white for a 3/3. Attacking tokens have double strike. Jeez, in this deck, very good. Whenever one or more tokens you control attacks a player, exile the top card of your library. During any turn you attacked with a token, you may play that card. And that's for each thing attacking. Like, that's for each token attacking a player. That's a lot of card draw in this. That can easily win a game. Plus the double strike. That's going to win a game. Outside of that, we've got the classic token creators like Siege Gang Commander. We've got Anim Pakal because, one, I just love this card. I think it's really, really cool. And she pumps out a ton of tokens. She gets 1/1 counters for each non-gnome creature you're attacking with. Then she spits out gnomes for each counter she has when she attacks. Then you can activate your commander to pump up all those gnomes later on, or your mercenaries to double the pump up. It's pretty good, honestly. The deck reads like it plays pretty well. Again, if you want to get into more of the nitty-gritty specifics of these decks, the links are in the comments, description, all that stuff. Check it out. Yeah, but with that, we tie a little bow on AGRUS Costs Mercenaries. So yeah, AGRUS Costs Mercenaries. Thought it was pretty cool. Moving on. This one just seems gross. ENDREK Sar Master Breeder. We've all seen this guy. We've all made fun of his name. It's a rite of passage in this game. 4 and a black for a 2/2. Whenever you cast a creature spell, create X 1/1 black Thrall creature tokens, where X is the spell's mana value. When you control 7 or more Thralls, sacrifice ENDREK Sar Master Breeder. Your creatures turn into Thralls. If you have more than 7 Thralls, you have to sack this guy. So, one, we are going to be walking the line on that. A lot of our creatures that are on the high end cost 6. We don't really run. We run 1 7-drop creature, and it's Butcher of Malakar, because Butcher of Malakar in this deck, you know, it's kind of too good to not run in this deck. Everything else, every other creature is 6 or less because we don't want it to be sacking ENDREK. Because we want to be sacking all those Thralls, using all those Thralls for some kind of fuel. Now, you might ask, how is this different from a normal ENDREK deck? That sounds exactly like ENDREK and what he does. This is an artifact deck. Yeah, I thought that was disgusting. One, we get access to Marionette Master. Gross, because we're going to have so many artifacts just like flooding into play. Why are we going to have so many artifacts flooding into play? Well, ENDREK's going to be making us a ton of Thralls. We can run cards like Ashnod's Altar, Phyrexian Altar, to be cracking all these Thralls, so then we can flood the board with more artifacts. Those artifact creatures are going to make us more Thralls that we can then sack to play more artifacts. And then you pair this with the aforementioned Butcher of Malakar, Grave Pact. Whatever your flavor of Death Trigger is, it seems like it kind of cranks a normal ENDREK deck to like 12 by just turning it into an artifact deck. You get access to stuff like Biotransference, which just turns your whole deck into artifacts. Whenever you cast an artifact, you lose 1, but you get a 2/2. Pair that with ENDREK. That's a lot of tokens flooding the board. Like a lot. Not to even mention stuff like Mirkwood Bats or Nadir Nightblade. Yeah, Nadir Nightblade. Just draining people for you making and or destroying or sacking tokens. Very easily can win a game when you're spamming this many artifacts into play, making this many Thralls, sacking this many Thralls, playing more artifacts. It's really, really good. There's also a couple really good Necrons that came out with the Warhammer set that fit perfect into this deck. We got Anakir the Traveler, which is 4 and a black for a 4/4. Whenever it attacks, you may cast an artifact spell from your hand or graveyard by paying life equal to its mana cost. So again, you'll still get your ENDREK trigger, but you'll get to cast something for free, which then you can sack. You'll have all your mana open now because you paid health instead of mana. Play another artifact, sack those Thralls. Again, insanely potent. The other one's Trazeen the Infinite, which is 4 and 2 black. Again, we're walking that line of 6/7 drop. For a 4/6 Death Touch, as long as it's on the battlefield, it has all activated abilities of all artifact cards in your graveyard. Yeah, just a big boy that'll give you 6 Thralls. It won't sack ENDREK because it won't give you the 7th Thrall. And then it just gets a bunch of activated abilities of like powerful artifacts you have in your graveyard. Speaking of which, we just run like pretty strong artifacts that are just walking the line of a 6-drop. We got Duplicate, which is good removal. It copies something. It's a 6-drop. We love that. Wormcoil Engine, just a super big threat. 6/6 for 6, Death Touch, Lifelink, splits off into a 3/3 Lifelink, 3/3 Death Touch when it dies. Insane. Also 6-drop, Steel Hellkite, same exact thing. Big, scary thing that's a 6-drop. Very good with the commander. Gives us Thralls. And then these things can just become threats of their own that we can win the game with, along with the amount of tokens we're producing, along with the sack outlets, along with the amount of mana we're getting. The deck just reads like it'll just be very like prolific. For number 3, we got LURRUS, the Dream Den, not as a companion, but as a straight up commander. If you don't know what LURRUS does, he's 1 and 2 hybrid Azorius for a 3/2 lifelink. During each of your turns, you may cast 1 permanent spell with mana value 2 or less from your graveyard. Now, what this dude normally does is you run Blood Artist, Viscera Seers, bunch of 1 and 2 drops that have death triggers, bunch of recursion, and you just go through this cycle of playing small creatures, sacking them, putting them back into play, draining opponents. It's a very potent deck. I did not do that. Shocker. I know. I don't think it would have been on this video if I did that, obviously. So, let's go Voltron. Because, you know, we don't have to necessarily follow its 2 or less rule when it's a commander, you know? I think a lot of people like think like, well, we need to make everything. It's like, you don't need to make everything, but a lot of it can be. And guess what a lot of guess what a lot of auras and equipments that are really good are? 2 drops or less. and being able to just always have those in your graveyard to just be equipping and enchanting LURRUS with is very, very good. So, just to highlight a couple for you. We got All That Glitters, 1 and a white for an enchantment. Enchant creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact or enchantment you control. That'll make LURRUS huge. Blackblade Reforged is a 2-drop that gives the equipped creature 1/1 for each land you control. Again, just extremely good for 2 mana for the amount of buff that you get for that. And you can just keep playing these from the graveyard with LURRUS if someone deals with them. The Umbras are very good. We've got Elend. We've got Elend Umbra, Felidar Umbra, Hyena Umbra. I think that's the only ones. Yes, because they all cost 2 or less, and if the creature would be destroyed, you would instead destroy the Umbra. Really good way to protect LURRUS, and really good way to buff LURRUS. It's just, they're like a no-brainer in this deck. Now, I know what you're thinking. This is cool in theory, but someone just smokes your commander, and it's like, just like every other Voltron deck, and it kind of falls through the cracks, and it won't be able to do much. You are right, technically, if I wasn't so goddamn smart. So, we run a Feign Death package. There's actually 11 of these effects now, as you can see, or if you're looking at the list or on screen, either way. And what a Feign Death trigger is it's a 1 black or it's 1 and a black normally. And it's an instant. It gives the creature, if this creature would die, return it into play. So, we run 11 of those. So if anybody does anything to LURRUS, as long as it's not exiling, we can just Feign Death it and bring him back into play, which is extremely powerful. Also, LURRUS is a 3-drop. Someone can kill him a couple times, we'll still be able to play him. Also, a lot of the buffs and stuff we have are protection, so that helps a lot with removal. But you might have a follow-up question to that. You might go, okay, Nick, if you're so smart, you just swung at us with your huge LURRUS. Now you're wide open, and we're going to beat your face because you have a huge, scary LURRUS. Man, you might have got me. You might have got me again. If I wasn't so goddamn smart. We also run a Pillow Fort package. We've got Crawl Space, Ghostly Prison, Light Minefield, Nils, Disciple Enforcer, Norn Xanax, and Sphere of Safety. So, you know, while we're bashing face and we leave our face wide open, we'll go ahead and just make it really hard for everyone to swing at us. Yeah, that's probably what we'll do. And like I said, we've got protection with like Swiftfoot Boots, Mother of Runes, Giver of Runes. So like, there's other ways to keep LURRUS in play. But yeah, this just seems like a cool way to build Voltron while being still very resilient with the Feign Death triggers, because that's the one weak spot in a Voltron deck, is that you kill the commander and it's like I don't have to worry about anything, but you have all these Feign Death triggers and you have a 3-drop commander. Those both make it easier to keep him in play. You have all this protection, which makes him easier to keep in play, and then you have all this Pillow Fort stuff, so it makes it easier to swing at people, which is really nice. I think the deck's cool. I think it's really interesting. I think this is a very cool approach to Voltron. I normally don't really have any interest in playing Voltron. This is a list where I'm like, I have most of these cards, and I kind of want to build it. So, who knows? That might be a deck in the future. But with LURRUS Voltron, we move on to the 4th and final deck of the video. And finally, to end off the video, we've got XAVIER Sol, Infested Captain. XAVIER Sol is a black, a green, and a blue for a 3/3. You can tap him, remove a counter from another permanent you control, populate, activate only as a sorcery, or you can tap him, sacrifice another creature, proliferate, activate only as a sorcery. So yeah, your counters turn into tokens, your tokens turn into counters. He's really cool. So the normal approach to XAVIER is I'm going to infect you, and then I'm going to kill you with my proliferate. Or I'm going to play Planeswalkers, and those Planeswalkers are probably going to make tokens, a lot of them, and I'm going to use those tokens to proliferate Planeswalkers and kill you with their ultimates. Both very good, both very scary, but both not at all the direction I went. I went with Sagas because it's actually really good. Once you read some of these Sagas, you'll be like, oh wait, being able to just reuse that one over and over again on your turn. So just to like pick out a couple that just so you can like really see how annoying this can be. For example, Blink from the Doctor Who set is a saga for 2, a black, and a blue. Chapter 1, choose target creature. Its owner shuffles it into their library and then investigates. Chapter 1 does that. Chapter 3 does that. It's a little confusing. Chapter 2 creates a 2/2 black alien angel creature token, and Chapter 4 creates that same alien token. So with XAVIER, we can tap him to remove a counter from a permanent to populate. Even if we don't have tokens to populate, we can still use this ability. So we play Blink. We shuffle the biggest threat in play into the opponent's library, and then we use XAVIER to remove that counter. And then guess what happens next turn? We get to shuffle another threat into the library. And then we can choose to use XAVIER again
remove the blink thing, shuffle another thing into the library. But maybe we need that 2/2 black angel. Okay, we just don't use Xavier. We let the second counter get put on it, we get the angel, we use Xavier, we get the angel again. Or we just don't use Xavier. We go, you see what I'm saying? You can just manipulate where you're at on sagas, which makes them become like super, super strong. Let me look for another example. Here's another example that's crazy. Genesis of the Daleks. 4 and 2 black. Chapter 1, Chapter 2, and Chapter 3 create a 3/3 black Dalek artifact with menace for each lore counter on Genesis of the Daleks. Yeah, you get this thing to 3, then you use Xavier to remove it and take it back down to 2, and then you put it back to 3 on your next turn. You are swarming the board with Daleks. And then you can just let it go to 4 on whatever turn you feel like you have got a sufficient enough amount of robot killing machines on your side. And then target opponent faces a villainous choice. They either destroy all Daleks, or each of your opponents loses life equal to the total power of your Daleks. This will just win you a game with Xavier. You're just like, yeah, sorry. I'm going to absolutely destroy, fuck, come home, bring home the bacon, all the stuff a good man does. Like, goddamn, that shit's nuts. Still not enough. Still not enough for you. That's fine. That's fine. Let's look at Scroll of Isildur. Yeah. Chapter 1, gain control of target artifact as long as you control Scroll of Isildur. Oh, and the ring tempts you. I didn't even read that part of this one. You can just keep stealing artifacts as long as you have Xavier in play. You just keep removing Chapter 1, keep getting Chapter 1, and you just keep stealing artifacts over and over and over and over and over. Or you go to Chapter 2 and you tap 2 things and put stun counters on them on every one of your turns. How annoying is that shit? And that's not even to mention all the sagas where the first chapter actually does just make a token. The Huntsman's Redemption gives us a 3/3 beast that we can start populating with Xavier to remove the counter from the saga to get more 3/3 beasts. Jugan, Defender of the Temple, gives us a 1/1 mana ramper that we could just keep getting 1/1 mana rampers to play more sagas with. This deck's very good. Kiora Best the Sea God. Yeah, you want to keep getting 8/8 Krakens with hexproof on every one of your turns. Death in Heaven. Just keep exiling their graveyard. Keep milling the opponent for 2, exiling their graveyard on every one of your turns. And then when you think it's sufficient enough creatures exiled, you just get 2/2 Cybermen for each of those. Jin Gataxius, who flips into the Great Synthesis, is an insane saga that you can manipulate. Same goes for Vornklex, flipping into the Grand Evolution, being like, oh my gosh, I can just keep milling 10 and getting 2 creatures on every one of my turns. Yes, you can. You really, really can. And if all of this insane value for being able to manipulate where you're at on a saga doesn't win you the game, which I truthfully think it will. This is nuts. We also run Sandworm Convergence, Shark Typhoon, and Zendikar's Royal to just be spitting out and flooding tons of tokens that we can be populating, which is another way to be bringing home the game with this. This one especially. This is why I saved this one for last in the video. I'm probably going to build this. This is just like very, and it's very affordable too. Sagas ain't worth shit.
Frodo and Sam, the Shire's Blessing. Our boy Frodo, Adventurous Hobbit, is a 1/3 with Vigilance that allows the ring to tempt us if we gain 3 or more life, and draws us a card if the ring has tempted us 2 or more times this game. While his partner Sam, Loyal Attendant, is a 2/4 that creates us a food token at the beginning of our combat. He also makes those food tokens activation cost 1 less. This deck's normally just a food, gain life deck, but ours is an Ascended token deck, with Frodo getting the ring and drawing us cards, also allowing us to make some of our small tokens ring bearers, which works great. While Sam creates food tokens on our turn guaranteed, which helps us get Ascended like multiple turns ahead of schedule. Plus, the Obzon colors gives us access to the best Ascended cards with a total of 11 Ascended cards, and all of them actually work really well with this specific strategy. Wayward Sawtooth gives us great ramp. Tendershoot Dryad and Illustrious Wanderglyph are great token creators, while Andoran and Radiant Destiny can give us board buffs for our tokens. It's super good. On top of this, running the normal token cards like Avenger of Zendikar to make way more bodies, or Cathar's Crusade to keep buffing your board from all the Tendershoot Dryad triggers. This thing seems pretty fun. Deck number 2 is NEVINYRRAL Suspend. NEVINYRRAL Urborg Tyrant is a nasty commander. At 6 mana, this Esper commander creates a 2/2 zombie for each creature that died this turn when it enters. You can also pay 1 when it dies to destroy all creatures, artifacts, and enchantments. This deck is normally just full of Feign Death cards, control cards, sack outlets to get tons of zombies, keep reusing our commander, wipe everybody else's board. You know, it's still got some of those Feign Death cards because they're just really good enough. But this deck is about predicting the end. It's about you're like the crazed guy on the side of the street that's like, the end of days is coming. This is what you're role playing with this deck. Using suspend cards like Eon Chronicler and Atraxi Warden to tell our opponents, hey, in so and so many turns, I'm gonna wipe you like a loaded diaper.
and that's word to Roderick. The idea is to suspend these creature and spell threats and use NEVINYRRAL the turn before they come out to optimize their potency. For example, Curse of the Cabal either makes them keep sacking everything, or we get the NEVINYRRAL board wipe playoff and they start sacking lands. It's super gross. Inevitable Betrayal might be my favorite though. Wipe the board with Nev, cast this next turn, put their threat on our side. Take something as simple as Shade of Trocaire. If it's the only thing on board because you just wiped with our Nev and pumpable, it can seriously deal some sick damage to the opponents. Keep in mind, you don't have to crack Nev the turn before all of this. You can just play it normal and crack it when the opponent's boards get too good. So you've still got the control option with this. And with the new Doctor Who set, it gave us a ton of new suspend toys to play with, so that's always good. Up next is COLFENOR Modular, and it's a Spicer Stoinch. COLFENOR is a commander I have built a couple times, and I thoroughly enjoyed, but I replaced it with Teneb because Teneb's my boy. COLFENOR turns each creature we control that dies into a regrow for another creature in our graveyard that has less toughness. In this deck, we run all the modular creatures, and 1/1 counter interactions, of course, as modular creatures sit in the grave as 0/0s, but they enter play bigger and give counters when they die, which will interact with the +1/+1 counter themes and works insanely well with COLFENOR. Pair something like Arcbound Worker with Arcbound Stinger, and then like an Ashnod's Altar with COLFENOR, and boom, you've got infinite mana, which seems pretty good. Put some death triggers in there, and you've got infinite death triggers. It seems like there's a lot of different ways to win with the modular boys, so it seems pretty versatile. Throw in some artifact interaction like Marionette Master, and this is a totally new way to go about COLFENOR that seems really fun to play. SEDRIS Cycle. I know. This one might get some comments. I get it. SEDRIS is a Grixis commander that gives all the creature cards in our graveyard unearthed for 2 and a black. Pair this with some of the huge, dorky, budget-friendly cards with cycling, like, I don't know, Oliphant or Rampaging War Mammoth. Or I'm sure there's a third elephant-based cycling card that's really good in red. The deck kind of makes itself. I might catch some flack for this one because 1, cycling cards are just good in SEDRIS. Couldn't agree more. And 2, SEDRIS came out in the same set that a ton of cycling cards came out in. But in my defense, people do not go straight cycling on SEDRIS. They run some of the cycling cards that are just good to run anyway, but they don't lean fully into it, which I think is very good, because it gives us access to some really good cards like Surly Badgesaur, which gives us tons of value for discarding as well as Waste Not. Plus, New Perspectives allows us to draw 3 cards and make all of our cycling costs 0, which paired with SEDRIS is just value city. Arcfiend of Ifnir, Ominous Seas, tons of cool stuff can go in here. I actually really like this. And finally, I really like this one. EXTUS, 1 spell slot. EXTUS is a Mardu commander that's front side is a 2/4 double strike with Magecraft. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, return a creature from your graveyard to your hand. Its backside is a huge 8-drop Rakdos spell that allows you to sack a creature to reduce its cost. The spell makes each opponent sack a creature and makes us a 3/6 demon that drains people. We really care about the front side. And I've got to be honest, this idea isn't necessarily for strategic effect, but man, is it super cool. Okay, so my idea is to run our commander and 37 lands. And if I'm mathing correctly, that leaves us 62 open slots. Those 62 slots are going to be 31 creatures and 31 instants and sorceries. No artifacts, no enchantments. And each of those 31 instants and sorceries are going to pair with one of your creatures in your deck perfectly, acting as that creature's spell slot. For example, we're going to run Young Pyromancer. His 1 spell slot would be Path of Pyromancy. We run Grave Titan. His spell slot would be Moan of the Unhallowed. Our Rakdos Lord of Riots, you know he keeps that charm on him, baby. I love this idea. Each creature has its 1 spell slot, and you kind of get to ask yourself, you get to run all your favorite creatures and ask yourself, what would that creature cast, which is actually really cool. Rakdos Treasures. Rakdos, Lord of Riots, is known for dealing big damage and cheating big threats into play. This deck does the same thing, but treasures go burr. There's a chance when I sack this treasure, the treasures won't stop being created. It's also in the best colors for treasures, having access to the best treasure creators like Dockside Extortionist and Zorn, while black gives us access to some good enders like Gary and a Marionette Master. Seems fun. I give it a C in creativity because it's doing what the deck already does, just faster. But it does give you access to some new cards and new lines of play. We're going to go with a solid A for power level, as Rakdos is already a super strong deck, and throwing treasures on top of that, seems like it could only get better. While getting a fun grade of B, because spamming big threats and playing treasures tends to be pretty fun. Okay, JUNJI Schemes. We all know Rakdos schemes in Modern. Play a Fury for its Evoke. In response, play a Death Defied card. Keep the Fury. Think that, but with JUNJI. Run every instant that brings back creatures if they're about to die, like Demonic Gifts or Fake Your Own Death. There's probably a good 10 to 15 of these, along with sack outlets like Ashnod's Altar, Altar of Dementia, sack Junji, play the fake death cards on your Junji, bring him back, rinse and repeat. Pair this with Junji's Drain or Junji's ability to reanimate a non-dragon, like, I don't know, maybe Gary again. And this seems genuinely scary. And super resilient. I give this deck a B in creativity because the theme is not a normal one, while still being a threat, which, speaking of threat, I'd give it a B again for its power level, as it's going to get super scary. In terms of fun, you'll never believe it. It gets a B as well, for the same reason. If it gets going, it seems like a blast. DELINA Weighted Dice. This deck is super straightforward, and probably just what the deck does anyway, but it's really cool sounding, so here goes. DELINA can make copies of attacking creatures infinitely if you always roll higher than a 15 on her attack trigger. So running cards like Barbarian Class or Krark's Thumb, let you get more chances to roll. Like I said, this one's pretty straightforward, but it does seem fun, so I put it on the list. This deck gets a D in creativity because it's built exactly how you'd imagine it to be built. In terms of threat, it's quite literally got to be a C because it's random how you roll. While the fun level of this thing seems awesome, I'm gonna give it an A. Plenty of moments where the whole table waits for that die roll. So, HAMZA Artifacts. This is a deck I actually have built, and I actually had an old deck tech on the channel for this video, but I took it down because I wasn't quite sold on the deck yet. But maybe you can do it better. HAMZA can make our creatures cost 1 less for each +1/+1 counter on it, so if we get enough counters on it in a full artifact creature deck, we can spam creatures on the board for free, which when paired with stuff like Beast Whisper can become insanely powerful. While on top of that, HAMZA just makes our Crater Hoofs and other game enders just cost way less anyways. It seems really strong. This deck gets a C for creativity as it doesn't take too much to come to the artifact conclusion with this guy, while his power grade is easily a B, as it stands on its own and pops off out of nowhere, while having multiple ways to win, while its fun grade is easily a B as well for the same reasons. SAFFI chains. Okay, I'm really excited about this one. This is one of my first commander decks I ever made, and it's incredibly fun. SAFFI sacks herself to bring back a creature you control from the grave the next time it would die this turn. Pair this with something like Sun Titan or Karmic Guide, and the name SAFFI Chain becomes pretty clear. The idea is you run sack outlets like Altar Dementia, Ashnod's Altar. We then sack our SAFFI, targeting our Sun Titans or Karmic Guides, choosing to put SAFFI into our graveyard instead of the command zone. After that, using our sack outlet to sacrifice the creature targeted by SAFFI. The creature gets sacrificed and comes back due to the SAFFI. The creature, for example, let's say Sun Titan, will bring back SAFFI with it, then do it again, and again, and again, and again. For infinite mills, infinite mana, whatever your sack outlet is. This deck gets an A for all categories, honestly. This thing is super creative, powerful, and fun as hell to play. I'm currently working on a new build for it because I haven't built it in probably a good 8 years. So I'm excited to see how the new version works, so expect the deck tech on this one in the future. TABORAX Aristotron. Let me explain. Alright boys, if you know me, I don't like Voltron. But this demon's got some serious hear me out vibes. TABORAX is a 3-drop demon that gets bigger and gains lifelink the more non-tokens we control that die. The deck strategy is straightforward, but a super cool way to approach Voltron, while as we're sacking, like aristocrats do with our altars to trigger our Blood Artist, we also have a massive commander that can one-shot players and gain us a ton of life, so that's awesome. Throw some boots on this thing, and it's seriously scary. In terms of creativity though, the deck gets a D, as there's really only one way to build him. While its power grade is an A easily, it seems like the normal Aristocrats deck that's mono black, which we know is powerful, while having alternate routes to victory with its commander being huge. Its fun ranking is going to be a C, unfortunately, as people either love or hate this type of strat, so TAIGAM Blink. TAIGAM Ojutai Master is sweet, a commander that gives dragons, instants, and sorceries uncounterability first, and secondly gives instants and sorceries you control rebound if he attacked this turn. What? This guy just reads extremely powerful. First thing I did was get some white out and get rid of that little dragon word there, and perfect. This deck idea is running all the blink spells we can get our hands on, which is tons, and use the commander to get to use those blink spells 2 times, paired with powerful ETB effects like Agent of Treachery or Moonshaker Cavalry to bring home games pretty easily. In terms of creativity, this deck gets a C, as it doesn't take much to get to the blink route with this commander, but it still seems really fun. And its power level seems quite high, honestly, as it's resilient by making our instants and sorceries uncounterable, while being able to run our own counter spells in blue, so I'm gonna go ahead and give that a B. And finally, in terms of fun, this deck honestly seems like a blast, so I'd have to give it a B again, as far as I'm concerned. FARAMIR, Prince of Pillow Fort. FARAMIR is sick. If you like to sit behind a wall of protection the whole game and periodically poke your head out from behind the fort and yell, "Come get some pussy." His whole shtick is at the end of turn, we choose an opponent, and at the end of that player's turn, we draw a card. if they didn't attack us. If they did attack us, we create 3 1/1 humans. It's actually sick. So if our pillow ain't quite fortin', we just get bodies on the ground to start building up. If our fortress is stuffed with feathers, on the other hand, we get card advantage. It seems pretty good. Run your classics, Ghostly Prison, Propagandas, and win however you see fit. In terms of creativity, this deck gets a D, as it does exactly what it's made to do. But what it does do is quite annoying and powerful, so it gets a B in that wheelhouse. And finally, the fun side of this deck is very one-sided. The player playing this deck will have fun watching the opponents not having fun. So I'll give it a C right down the middle. Storvald equal to damage dealt. Storvald bants in a way, other bants just don't bant. For 7 mana, you get a giant that can turn other creatures into either 1/1s or 7/7s, or both. This deck is based around running low mana cost creatures that have effects that give us bonuses for damage dealt to opponents, like Cephalid Constable, which bounces creatures for each damage it does to opponent, or Cold-Eyed Selkie, which draws us a card for each damage done to an opponent. Then play our commander, turning these creatures into 7/7s, and yeah, getting tons of value there. In terms of creativity, this deck gets a B, because to me it seems like they wanted us to go all in with evasive creatures like Invisible Stalker, but we're leaning more towards damage dealt, which I think is kind of cool. In terms of power, this deck gets a C, solely because of the commander's mana cost. If this was even a 5-drop commander, I'd give it a B. And in terms of fun, I'd definitely give this commander an A, because turning your small creatures into huge 7/7s that deal massive damage seems awesome. Please don't hit me, but I have another scheme deck. The exact same thing I said before with Junji. You remember that? We're sacking him. We're bringing him back with the fake death stuff. We're doing it all over and over and over. We run that, but with the ever-changing Dane to sack other stuff with death triggers. Like, Junji would go in this deck, for sure. Fill the deck with all the best ETB and death triggers along with Feigned Death cards and go nuts. This deck gets a B for creativity, as it's probably meant to be an Aristocrats deck, but this is way cooler. In terms of power, this also gets a B. As a 3-drop commander that can get very powerful triggers, seems pretty good. Also, a blast to play, it seems like, so I'm gonna have to give it another B. TAIGAM Sidisi's hand, 3 a blue and a black. For 3/4, you skip your draw step, which sucks, but hear me out, it gets better. During your upkeep, you get to look at your top 3 cards, put 1 into your hand, the rest into your graveyard. So it's a better draw if you're in like a Reanimator build, which is exactly what I'm thinking for this thing. You can also pay a black and tap it, exile X cards out of your graveyard, and give a creature -X/-X, which takes away kind of the clunky aspect of Reanimator decks where you're self-milling yourself a lot, but there is some cards you don't want to be self-milling. I don't want to be self-milling my spot removal, my board wipes, my card draw. This commander allows you to turn some of those non-creature spot removals into removal with her ability, which is actually a super nice niche that a lot of these Reanimator decks don't fill. Put in your Animate Deads, your Dance of the Deads, your favorite stuff to reanimate, your Mere Battle Spheres, your Grave Titans. I know you guys. I know you sick fucks. And just go crazy. Go wild. Next, we got a mono blue control deck with, let me make sure I get her name right, Kaho Minamo, Historian. Not one lesson. Not one lesson. She's 2 and 2 blue for a 2/2, and when she comes into play, you search your library for 3 instant cards and exile them. And then you can pay X, tap her, and cast an instant card with a converted mana cost of X without paying its mana cost. So my brain immediately went to control. It was like, we're going to tutor up some instant speed board wipes with like Cyclonic Rifts and Aetherize, and we're going to tutor up some counter spells like Counterspell or Essence Scatter or Negate or anything like that. But then my little brain started kicking in and got a little spicy. What if you made one of those cards a blur? What if you made one of those cards Displace? Yeah. Then you can counter something, you can board wipe something, and then your last spell that you cast with her is your Blink spell. And then you blink her, and you search for 3 more instant spells, being a counter spell, board wipes, and then, say it with me, a blink. Yes, and then you get to do it all over again. It seems pretty good. Throw in like untappers, like a Kelpie Guide or like 1,000-Year Elixir so you can get more uses out of her ability. And then just go fucking wild. Control the shit out of that game. Throw in some Hullbreaker Core. Throw in some Naxahal. Throw in the classic can't be countered big beefy Leviathan Game Enders for control and just go crazy. I won't watch. Go fucking bananas. Lastly, we've got, let me read this list I've got on my screen here. An Azorius Zombie Token Aristocrat Dementia Combo Deck. At the helm, we've got Tobias, Doomed Conqueror. I get it. It's another... Okay. As I said, I've never seen these played. Tobias is 2 a white and a blue. For a 3/2 flash, when he dies, you get to put a 2/2 black zombie creature token into play for each non-token creature you control that dies. Make this whole deck about either 1, bashing your opponents with a shit ton of zombies that have flying because of like Archetype of Imagination, or Gerard, I think he's on the screen, the one that gives him flying, the mono blue one, or Thunderhawk Gunship, that's a better example, and just bash face with your flying zombies.
Or 2, you can combo off with Ashnod's Altar, Ultra Dementia, or any other sack outlet you can find that's in blue-white. I don't think there's very many of them besides those 2 that you can really like combo off with. And then run cards like Madrak or Anointed Possession to just double the amount of zombies you're getting, sack them all to altars, mill a shit ton of cards, add a shit ton of mana to play some kind of combo piece, or just keep comboing off and mill them off with the Altar of Dementia. Run cards like Luminous Broodmoth is a great one. Gift of Immortality is another great one. False Demise is another great one to keep Tobias coming back into play so you can keep sacking him and keep stacking up the amount of creatures that have died. This deck seems like there's a couple different routes you can go when you play it. It's a Azorius Aristocrats kind of style build, which is super weird.
Garna the Blood Flame. Garna is 3 a black and a red for a 3/3 with flash. When Garna enters the battlefield, return to your hand all creature cards in your graveyard that were put there this turn. Other creatures you control have haste. Let's get into how we could build around her. The obvious most powerful part about her is her second enter the battlefield trigger and the fact you can flash it in. Being able to return a full grip of creatures that died this turn is powerful, but hard to pull off a useful play with, as Garna's going to cost 5+ mana. You won't have much access mana to continue interacting. This is probably where most people decide she's better in the deck than as the commander, but we push forward. My brain immediately went to 0-drop creatures like Ornithopter or the Kobolds. If they die and we play Garna, we can drop them all over again for free. In a similar vein, cards like Goblin Arsonist and Fireblade Charger only cost 1 and ping opponents when they die, so at their cheap cost and damage, work great in here. Next, we need ways for these creatures to all hit the graveyard on the same turn. On top of our board wipes that we're going to run, sack outlets are going to be able to sacrifice our full board and give us value from it, in the form of mill with cards like Altar of Dementia or straight up damage with cards like Goblin Bombardment. Next, throw in some Feign Death triggers like Feign Death itself or Supernatural Stamina to sack our Garna at the end of this sack chain, bring back Garna, bring back all the stuff we just did, and do it all over again, draining our opponents for game. Rook Hexgold Nabber is next. Rook Hexgold Nabber is 2 and a red for a 2/2 trample haste. Whenever an equipped creature other than Rook attacks or dies, you may attach all equipments attached to that creature to Rook. My idea for this build is a Voltron list that also goes wide. But how do we do that? First, we need cards that become threats when they have equipments on them. Cards like Valduk, Keeper of the Flame, and Champion of the Flame are amazing to stack equipments on and make into threats. Along with Kazul's Toll Collector, which is a card I just came across, which is awesome to just throw a bunch of huge equipments onto. Now keep in mind, not only attacking allows us to switch equipment on Rook, but also creatures dying, so running sack outlets would let us switch equipments at instant speed. So cards like Scorched Rusalka and Goblin Bombardment are great. Then just put in your favorite equipment cards. The idea is to play cards like the aforementioned Champion of the Flame and Valduk and our Commander Rook and begin to equip powerful equipments to them and creating a few serious threats on board to bash face. If they block Rook, we just don't do anything. Our powerful creatures are probably going to win the trade. If they don't block Rook, we sack our entire board full of equipped creatures. All the equipments go onto Rook. We follow it up with a Teamer Battle Rage or a Raking Claws or any instant speed double strike giver and commander damage, one-shot them out of nowhere. And if that doesn't work, you just bash face with all your huge equipped creatures. Finally, we've got Wrath, Weatherlight Stalwart. Wrath is a white and a blue for a 1/2. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you may tap 2 untapped creatures you control. If you do, draw a card. 3 and a white, creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain Vigilance. At first, this seems like a token deck. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you can tap 2 of your untapped creature tokens, draw a card. 3 and 2 white, buff up all your tokens, give them Vigilance. And while yes, token cards are really good in this deck, may I introduce you to the untap mechanic from the Lorwyn block, able to untap themselves to activate an ability. So if we have Silkbind Fairy and Pure Sight Marrow in play, we can cast an instant or sorcery, tap them to draw a card with our Wrath, untap them using their abilities to either do it again or just have them up for blockers. In the instant and sorcery department, cantrips are going to be our best friend as they draw us a card already, and with Wrath's ability, we'll draw an additional card. It's super good in this deck. Think Ponder or Preordain, both awesome options. Now that we could easily draw 5+ cards every turn, what are we feeding that into? Cards like Teferi's Tutelage and Psychosis Crawler will help us bring home the game with all this drawing. Put a Talran in here for more creatures to tap, and an opposition to tap those Lorwyn untappers, and you will control the field.
Genku Future Shaper. And no, I'm not talking about that Genku I used to go to elementary school with. I wonder what that guy's up to. We're talking about this awesome card. For 2 a white and a blue, we get a 2/5. Whenever another non-token permanent we control leaves the battlefield, choose one that hasn't been chosen and create a token with the following characteristics. Either a 2/2 white fox with vigilance, a 1/2 blue moonfolk with flying, or a 1/1 black rat with lifelink. And he also has the ability to pay 3, a blue, and a white to put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control. Pretty awesome, actually. This blink token Azorius commander seems great with, obviously, token creators like Feldar's Retreat to help flood the board and buff it, along with single target blink spells like Cloud Shift or Planar Incision to blink our commander so we can reset his ability, paired with board-wide blink spells like Lae'zel's Acrobatics or Eerie Interlude to blink our entire boards, which will 1 trigger our commander. all 3 times most of the time, but also we'll run creatures like Sun Titan, Overlord of the Mistmoors to trigger Genku's ability and flood the board with tokens. With access to blue, we can run tons of really fun cards for a token strategy, like Archetype of Imagination to give our board flying and make opponents lose flying, or Dowerport Mage to draw cards and help permanents leave the battlefield on our side. Not to mention the obvious Displacer Kitten wouldn't be bad on this list, obviously. Not to even mention our commander kind of has a built-in win condition on it. You just get to buff your whole board with +1/+1 counters, which you might say, yeah, but that's kind of a nombo, because if we're running a blink deck and we're blinking some of the stuff that has 1/1 counters on it, we're losing the 1/1 counters on it. True, but your tokens keep them, because we're not going to be blinking the tokens. And 3, maybe run the Ozolith, and then you get to keep all your 1/1 counters that you're missing, and blink stuff, and make your tokens big. Even outside of that, I think the amount of tokens you're going to be making, putting a 1/1 counter on just the tokens, having a few fall off here and there, not that big of a deal. And the fact that it is an activated ability, you know, lends itself to maybe running a training ground, so you can make that activated ability a little bit more spammable and games a little bit quicker. What's that?
Run plenty of cards that can remove themselves from play, like Wayfarer's Bauble.
Wow, that was actually very helpful and insightful. Yeah,
Wayfarer's
listen to him.
Bauble, Ate the Spellbound,
And,
stuff like that.
and there it is. Up next, we've got Geode Moog Ancient, which I'm actually going to probably build as well, if I'm being honest. I've been looking for a man-land deck, and this commander really supplies that. For 2, a green and a blue, we get a 2/4. When Geode Moag Ancient enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 green Forest Dryad land creature token for each time you've cast your commander from the command zone this game. At the beginning of each combat, land creatures you control get +X/+X, where X is Geode's power. Geode's really cool, because it's a lands matters deck, but it doesn't matter that lands are coming into play, it just matters that the lands that do come into play also can turn into creatures. Cards like Dryad Arbor, Mutavault, are the bread and butter of this deck. Very good. Any kind of like cheap Blinkmoth Nexus, Inkmoth Nexus, Blinkmoth Nexus, Inkmoth Nexus, say that 5 times fast. Those are both very good in here as well. Yeah, there's also a ton of shenanigans to just turn your lands into creatures. Cosmium Confluence, Lanalore Loam Speaker will help turn non-creature lands into creatures. The commander itself also creates 1/1 Dryads when it comes into play, so stuff like Conjurer's Closet, Displacer Kitten, they're gonna be good in here as well, because you're getting more Dryads that are also lands, which is just more stuff that you can buff with your commander's ability. Deadeye Navigator, another great one to spam your commander into play.
Or in your case, unman land.
Hilarious. You have anything of value to throw in this time, or are we back on this bullshit?
Might Evokes or Preposterous Proportions could be good in here with the board buff.
Okay, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah, throw some of those in there. Up next, we've got Lazav, Familiar Stranger from Outlaws of Thunder Junction, coming in for 1, a blue and a black for a 1/4. I don't know why all the commanders on this list have big butts, or why big butt commanders are not ran very much. Just some data I'd like to throw your way. This deck utilizes the Commit a Crime mechanic to not only trigger a bunch of Commit a Crime effects, but also to gain access to exiling the best creatures out of everyone's graveyard with Lazav, and then turning Lazav into the best thing that's in anyone's graveyard, which, you know, both are good. We run cards like Gissa, the Hellraiser, and Deep Muck Desperado as additional Commit a Crime triggers in the form of 2/2 zombies and mill respectively. Pair this with cards like Hex Parasite and Spatial Binding to spam crimes on each person's turn, maximizing your crime triggers. And we've got a deck you can honestly take in whatever direction you want. The idea of just trying to commit as many crimes as you can to trigger all these cards, gain access to the best thing in anyone's graveyard, I think that's enough of a jumping off point for you to kind of go whatever way you want with it.
Agreed. Take this one wherever your heart desires.
Wow, you're being super
Or
well
in Nick's case, heart disease.
Yeah, there we go. This next deck, no joke, is the only equipment and aura deck I have ever been interested in making. Ever. And that's because the commander's ability allows you to run less equipments and auras, which is ironically the reason those decks aren't fun to pilot or very difficult to pilot, is you need to run enough auras and equipments to make the cards that interact with auras and equipments work, but auras and equipments require creatures. So in the deck building process, you're already kind of hitting a snag there. But with Danitha, New Benalia's Light, she gets that problem out of here. For 1, a green and a white, we get a 2/2 with Vigilance, Trample, Lifelink, a real stat checker. Once during each of your turns, you may cast an aura or equipment spell from your graveyard. So we can run tons of creatures that self-mill us, like Shigeki, Jukai Visionary, the Aftermath Analyst, along with dredge creatures like Greater Moss Dog, Golgari Grave Troll. See, now running all these creatures that mill us will fill our graveyard. It'll allow us to see more of our deck. It allows us to run fewer auras and equipments because we only really need a few good ones. We don't need to run tons to make sure we hit any. And more importantly, they give us bodies in play to put those equipments on. There's a cool interaction in this deck with Faith Healer and Moldvine Cloak to guarantee plenty of self-mill while also gaining 3 life each turn, which, you know, isn't bad, while also providing another body on the board in the form of Faith Healer itself, which we can use our ores and equipments to buff up. On top of this, running cards like Sun Titan and Savine's Reclamation can help the deck be a little bit more resilient with all this self-mill going on, and it's just a cool list. I think it's actually one that we could really sink your teeth into and figure out how to get it to tick. Do you have any tips here, Wallet Man?
Celestine Living Saint seems good.
I actually love that. Do that. And for the final deck, it wasn't just the hook for the video. I am being serious. This is the deck that I'm probably going to build most likely. It's a very cool idea. We've got Gimli, Mournful Avenger. Gimli is 1 a red and a green for a 3/2. Gimli, Mournful Avenger has indestructible as long as 2 or more creatures died under your control this turn. Whenever another creature you control dies, put a 1/1 counter on Gimli. When this ability resolves for the 3rd time, Gimli fights another creature you don't control. Excuse me? Excuse me? This guy's good. How many decks? 781 decks. What's wrong with you guys? This commander's very cool, and I have a way to make it even cooler. Now, you might look at this and go, Nick, it's a straightforward token deck. You run tokens, you run sack outlets. That's why it's not that good, because it's green-red. Not a lot of sack outlets you can run. And I say, you know what? That's actually a pretty good point. There's better token decks that have access to black. You're 100% right. Even if they have access to white, that's easier than just being, you know, green-red. Except for with Eldrazi Scions and Eldrazi Spawn tokens. We can sack these little Eldrazi guys for 1 colorless at any time. So at any moment, we can crack 3 of them to give our commander indestructible and have it fight something. Pretty useful. But those Eldrazi Scions and Spawns also make us 1 colorless mana. So if we pack the deck full of giant spells like Artisan of Kozilek, Blightsteel Colossus, you have a super strong deck because your commander's getting huge. Your commander has built-in removal, has built-in protection. You have swarms of tokens that you can just choose to go that route if you want to, or you can sack all of those tokens to start playing these giant late game threats. And you might say, Nick, is there enough stuff that makes these tokens to even consider running it? Yes, there very much is. I've made short little lists for each of these decks. If you want to look at them, they're not full decks. They're just a handful of cards that kind of suggest the direction that I would go with the deck. Looking up how many cards produce Scion and Spawn tokens, there's enough. And they're honestly pretty decent. Cards like Awakening Zone and Void Attendant can fill our board with Eldrazi Scions and Spawn tokens to help fuel this list. What I love about this deck is that it looks like it's just a token deck when you play it. You're just making a ton of Scion tokens, you're flooding the board. A lot of the stuff that makes Scion and Spawn tokens are just creatures in of themselves, so you're flooding the board with those as well. You can run a couple board buff cards like Overwhelming Stampede in here and decide to go to the token route if you want, or you can just sack these tokens and go the playing extremely late game threats in the mid game because I have all these tokens and all this floating mana. Or we can just use Rogue's Passage and smack face with our giant Gimli, because Gimli is also getting +1/+1 counters this whole time. Saruman is 1, a blue, a black, and a red. How big is this dude? I think the fact that I never know the creatures I talk about's power and toughness is a huge telltale sign of what kind of player I am. I just like the abilities. I don't want any of these numbers. He's a 2/5. He got a big butt. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, amass X, where X is that spell's mana value, and then goblins and orcs you control have ward 2. I was just about to say, let me know if this is too loud. You can't. You can't let me know. We play non-creature spells, we get to amass orcs equal to that spell's mana value. It's pretty good. And then our orcs get ward, so also good. If you want me to make a Moxfield video, I could make you a Moxfield video, and I'm sitting here using the text trying to remember what cards do instead of the visual options. I'm definitely the guy to show you. Oh, these battles are going to be a bitch to read. Just to sum up the deck before we get into this painstaking, neck-cracking reading session. Battles are a new card type that enter the battlefield. You pick an opponent that then defends that battle, and then you can attack that battle like you would a planeswalker or a player, and if you can get that battle's health down, whatever it enters with, to 0, it will flip back onto your side as whatever it is on the backside. They're cool. I like the idea of them. They didn't get utilized very much. No one builds around them that much. They're a little too difficult, if you're being honest. But this deck does it pretty well, honestly. So the idea is we're playing these battles that will give us high value, I think creatures most of the time, sometimes other permanents. The idea is you're playing these battles to get value, because battles will do pretty good stuff when they enter the battlefield. And then when you can manage to defeat them, they flip back onto your side as something that's most of the time pretty fucking good. We play a battle. A battle is a non-creature spell. That'll let us amass orcs with Saruman, and then we attack said battles with the orc. That's the too long didn't read of it all. If you want to actually get into the deck, we'll get more specific. Got to get my old man glasses and situated here. forgot you can make it so your screen can't turn. I forgot my grandson told me you can make it so the screen doesn't turn. That's fucking so useful. We have a total of 13 battles in here that are all super good. They definitely are doing the thing. So stage 1 of the deck, the battles. We're going to be trying to play these. We're going to be amassing orcs when we cast battles off Saruman. And then we're going to be swinging those orcs at the battles. So just some of the battles. If you want to look at the full deck list, all the deck lists are going to be down in the description. For example, Invasion of Amonkhet. 1, a blue and a black for a battle with 4 health. When it enters the battlefield, each player mills 3 cards, and each opponent discards a card, and you draw a card. Not bad. A 3-drop that makes everyone discard, you draw, everyone mills. Seriously not bad. We're going to run some recursion. It's a commander deck. We'll be able to get back some of the stuff we mill. And then when it flips, it comes into play as a copy of any creature in any graveyard except it's a 4/4. So you pop this battle at the right time, you could rip something super scary out of someone's grave, start getting a really powerful effect running on your board really early. Everyone just milled cards on the front side, so maybe you hit something that was big. I like this one a lot, actually. There's battles in the form of removal, like Invasion of Innistrad, 2 and 2 black for a battle with flash. When it enters the battlefield, target creature an opponent controls gets -13/-13 until end of turn. And then it flips into Deluge of the Dead, which is an enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, create 2 2/2 black zombies, pay 2 and a black, exile a creature card from a graveyard, create a 2/2 black zombie. That's a really good token engine. And then the front side of it's just a 4-drop removal piece? Sure, it seems actually genuinely pretty good, actually. Need a board wipe? Battles also have board wipes. Invasion of Fiora, 4 and 2 black for a battle. When it enters the battlefield, choose one, destroy all legendary creatures, or destroy all non-legendary creatures. Pretty decent board wipe, too, honestly. Keep your Saruman board wipe. This one's extra cool because it flips into Marchesa. Marchesa, Resolute Monarch, is a 3/6 Menace Death Touch. When it attacks, remove all counters from up to 1 target permanent. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you haven't been dealt damage since your last turn, you draw a card and lose 1 life. Solid creature to have on the board fairly early. Like, after a board wipe, dude, y'all have her in play after a board wipe. That seems pretty strong, actually. And then you just got, like, big powerhouse ones, like Invasion of Ravnica. 5 colorless for a battle. When it enters the battlefield, exile target non-land permanent an opponent controls that's exactly 2 colors. You know how many 2-color commanders there are? 2-color cards that are just, like, awesome. I love 2-color cards. This is going to get rid of something good. It will. And then if you can flip this thing, which has 4 health, by the way, it becomes Guildpact Paragon, which is a 5/5. Whenever you cast a spell that's exactly 2 colors, look at the top 6 cards of your library. You may reveal a card that's exactly 2 colors from among them, put it into your hand, and the rest in the bottom of your library. And the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. Invasion of Segovia, 2 and a blue, 4 health. When it enters, you get 2 1/1s. And then if you can make it flip, your non-creature spells have Convoke. It's an enchantment. That's super strong to have in a battle deck. And it just kind of goes on like this. There's 13 really solid ones in here. If you want to look at all of them, check out the link. What's really cool is they retconned that a lot of things that say deal damage to any target can now target battles, which is really useful for us. So we have some ways to deal direct damage to battles. 2 of them actually being battles themselves, which is really cool. We've got Invasion of Ragatha and Invasion of Olgatha. One of them deals 4 damage to something, including a battle, or the other one deals 3 damage to anything and you gain 3 life. Both can deal damage to battles, which helps you chain flip like 2-3 battles a turn. Super strong stuff. Classic Lightning Bolt, 1 damage to deal 3 to a battle. A lot of the time is enough to flip it. Instant speed, that's like really, really good. That was the visual thing missing that I was talking about. My camera stopped. That's okay, though. We got it running again. Outside of rocks, card draw, removal, wipes, the last important part to note about this deck are the enders. All will be 1 whenever counters are put on something. We get to ping an opponent. With the amount of amassing we're going to be doing, that's a lot of 1/1 counters. That's a lot of pings. That'll definitely kill somebody. Warg Rider and Concierge of Umbar are both like cards that give really heavy orc evasion and then amass the orc to be bigger. That'll win a game. You just smack in face with a big orc. Or you're just flipping battles with a big orc, whichever. Sauron the Dark Lord, very, very good. It just amasses when our opponents play things. It's a giant threat. This thing just is so scary. With that, if you're interested in the full deck, go in the description as usual. We'll move on to the second one, though. Gotta go quicker. I gotta lose the glasses. I don't know how I forgot those glasses were solid red. I was like, why is this so difficult to read? Because no colors exist. Next, we've got Gen Arcanum Weaver. A black, a white, and a red. You can pay a black, a white, and a red, tap him, sacrifice an enchantment, bring back an enchantment. It's pretty good. A lot of people just go, hey, I'm going to run enchantments. Just all my favorite enchantments. If one dies, I get back another one. I'll run a lot of cheap, not useful enchantments that are okay, like protection, and then I'll use those to get back huge late game enchantments. Makes sense. I went with sagas because fun. Actually, token sagas. Let me correct myself. Token saga deck, which is very cool because a lot of the sagas make tokens. A lot of token interaction is enchantments. It kind of just worked with Gen, honestly. If you watch my last deck video, I made an XAVIER deck based around sagas, which read really powerful and then play tested really powerful on Mox Field as well. So I was like, I like sagas. I like some of these new card types, some of these new ideas Magic's doing that I wasn't a huge fan of when they first happened. I kind of want to give them a second chance. So I made another saga deck, and I like it a lot again. And like I said, it's a token saga deck because sagas make a lot of tokens. Genesis of the Daleks. Yeah, just the first 3 chapters are going to go ahead and make you a 3/3 Dalek for each counter it has on it. That's a lot of Daleks. And then the last chapter is going to deal a shit ton of damage to them. Love Song of Night and Day gives us a 1/1 bird with flying, which is cute. It also lets us draw cards, so it's 2 for 1 in us there. Oath of the Grey Host gives us 3 fairies at the end of it, which is really, really good, especially when we can just reuse it with Gen. 3 Blind Mice gives us a 1/1 mouse. It copies a token, and then it buffs our whole board. This might be one of the better ones. And just like the battles before them, they supply a lot of the card draw removal stipulations. There's a lot of them that just do that anyway. The Witch's Vanity destroys a creature that costs 2 or less. That can just be very useful in a situation. Hidetsugu consumes all, destroys everything that costs 1 or less, which is like, yeah. Elspeth Conquers Death, exiles something. Makes it so your opponents can't cast stuff unless they pay 2 more, and then buffs your creature. Fable of the Mirror Breaker. Discard cards, draw cards, create 2/2s, create copies of stuff that's buffing our tokens. This is a very good one, actually. I thought this was going to be one of the weaker lists. It turned out to be one of the best. This one's genuinely nuts. Outside of that, we've just got classic token interaction. We've got a Johnny's Chosen. Whenever we play an enchantment, we get a token with all these sagas that are already making tokens. This almost feels like how this dude was meant to be made. Archon of Sun's Grace, same thing. Gives us a 2/2 whenever we play an enchantment. Yes. Feldar's Retreat, an enchantment that buffs our board or makes tokens. Sure. Sigil of the Empty Throne. All of our sagas become 4/4 angels as well. You see where I'm going. The deck's very, very good. We run plenty of recursion like Savine's Reclamation, Sun Titan, so we can get back a lot of these sagas. Maybe even let our commander go to the graveyard, get him back with one of those. This one's really strong. I would definitely go check this one out. In the same vein as the last 2, actually. I didn't realize how much I did this on this video. So the next one is actually a Boulder's Gate commander with a choose a background. Wasn't a big fan of these. Still not a huge fan. After building this deck, though, I'm like, all right. And this is a really cool one, too. I've yet to see this. We've got Levan, Cultist of Tiamat, which is 2 and a red for a 1/3. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, target creature you control gets +X/+0 until end of turn, where X is that spell's mana value. And then as the background, I have Shameless Charlatan, which is 1 and a blue for an enchantment. Commander creatures you control have 2 and a blue. This creature becomes a copy of another target creature. The idea here is we're playing spells, non-creature spells. Those spells are going to buff other creatures we control. Those creatures, a lot of the time, are going to have abilities or triggers or something that cares about their power that we can then double by making Levan a copy of that thing with charlatans, with Shameless Charlatan background. So let me explain. For example, Cephalid Constable is 1 and 2 blue for a 1/1. When it deals damage to an opponent, you can return X target permanents to that opponent's hand. Okay, now if we pair that with Levan, we can go ahead and play a non-creature spell, buff this guy up, and start bouncing a very powerful amount of permanents back to our opponent's hand, actually. Dream Pillager, when it smacks someone, you get to exile that many cards off the top equal to its power. You may play those until the end of your next turn. Yeah, if we can make this guy 6/6, 7/7, 8/8, 9/9 very easily, and then just pretty much draw that many cards, that's very good. Same thing with Felden. He's the exact same thing. We can just buff him up, smack face, exile a bunch, play those things. Olivia's Attendants give us blood tokens equal to the amount of damage she deals to an opponent, so if we can buff her up, she's already a 6/6. That's a ton of blood tokens, ton of card filtering. Really, really strong. So the idea is we're playing creatures like that care about their power. And then we're casting non-creatures using Levan's trigger to buff these things up that care about their power to get maximum value. We also have stuff that just straight up deals creatures power. We have stuff like Soulfire. Target creature deals damage equal to its power to any target. Okay. That creature will also get a +3/+0 buff from Levan because Soulfires cost 3. Super good interaction there. Spike Shot Elder might be one of the best cards in here. You can pay 1 and 2 red to have it deal damage equal to its power to target creature or player. Yeah, just a repeatable fling on this guy, essentially, in this deck, which is like incredibly strong. Then we got just like straight up fling cards. We've got Fling, Thud, where you can just sack a creature to deal its power. They're going to be really good in this deck. We've also got Chandra's Ignition, which might be the best card in this deck. 3 and 2 red, target creature does damage equal to its power to each other creature and each opponent. Wow. That's going to give it +5/+0 buff with Levan too before it does that. This could easily be a game ender. Definitely the best card in the deck. There's also a small unblockable package with stuff like Aqueous Form and Rogue's Passage just to make sure some of these big buffed creatures can get through, as well as like 3 really big goofy spells to just like try to win the game with. Spell Twine, Hit the Motherlode, Apex of Power. You can kind of throw in whatever you want. Big spells are going to buff your creatures big with Levan, so whatever you're into. I think the flinging and the direct damage and the power matters is going to be enough to bring home games, though. If you want to check out the full list, down in the description. And with that, we'll move on to the next one. Up next is Shigeki Toolbox, which is a quick one. Thank goodness, because we're running out of footage here. Shigeki is 1 and a green for a 1/3. You can pay 1 and a green to return Shigeki to your hand, reveal the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal a land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, and put the rest into your graveyard. You can also channel Shigeki by paying 2x, 2 green, and discarding him. Return X target non-legendary creatures from your graveyard to your hand. So playing him and bouncing him is going to mana ramp us and fill our grave. And then channeling him, which is discarding him out of our hand, is going to allow us to return X target non-legendary things. Yeah, so this deck is just toolbox. You're pretty much just playing Shigeki, bouncing Shigeki, playing Shigeki, bouncing Shigeki, playing Shigeki, bouncing Shigeki to get mana ramp and to flood your graveyard early game. Once you've filled up the graveyard, you're going to have plenty of tool options in there. And whatever situation you're in, you find yourself in, you channel Shigeki and you pull out the tools you need from your graveyard. Now, you might ask, if you're channeling Shigeki, it's going to be stuck in your graveyard. We do run plenty of recursion, like Eternal Witness, Genesis, Road to Return, Virtue of Strength. There's going to be ways to get back Shigeki. You could probably even need a few more, honestly. Shigeki also interacts really good with Threshold, where if you have 7 or more cards in your graveyard, the card will get a bonus. So stuff like Crows and Restore and Far Wanderings are going to mana ramp us a ton because our graveyard's going to get filled very quickly. Or Crows and Beast is just a 4-drop 8/8, which I thought was awesome. I just think that's neat. There's also a small landfall package with Avenger Zendikar, Rampaging Balos, Titania, Protector of Argoth, and Titania Nature's Force, because we're going to be having a lot of lands coming to play with Shigeki's ability as well. So that also felt like a small package was needed in there. We also have a playing lands from Graveyard package with stuff like Aftermath Specialist, Blossoming Tortoise, Random Map Excavators, stuff that lets you play lands from the graveyard, again, because we're going to be filling it so hard. That then interacts with the landfall. All the while, you're toolboxing out anything to deal with problems. There's a permanent you need dealt with, Beast Within out of your graveyard. There's a flyer you need dealt with, Arashi out of your graveyard. Artifact or Enchantment, Archdruid's Charm, Grove Archer, Reclamation Sage, Kenra's Transformation. There's a lot of options that you can have sitting in your graveyard. You can Shigeki them out, channel them into your hand, deal with all the stuff you need. You're mono green, so you're going to be stomping face anyway. Yeah, I think it's really solid. I like it a lot. Up next, we've got Gyrus, Walker of Corpses, which is X, a black, a red, and a green for a 0/0. It enters the battlefield with a 1/1 counter equal to the total amount of mana spent to cast it, so you can just play it for 3 as a 3/3, which we will be doing every single game. When it attacks, you can exile a creature out of your graveyard, then you create a token that's a copy of that creature that's tapped and attacking, and then you exile that token at the end of turn. So what are we trying to do? We're playing 0/0 creatures, or at least creatures with 0 power that get a huge buff when they come into play and are way overcosted, and we're going to put them into our grave, and we're going to cheat them out really early with the commander. This one out of all of them, I may or may not have a cart with half these cards in it already, because this is fun, and it playtests really, really well. What kind of 0/0s am I talking about? How about Bloatfly Swarm? How about that? 3 and a black for a 0/0, enters the battlefield with 5 1/1 counters on it, has flying. If it would be dealt damage by something and has a 1/1 counter on it, instead, you remove that many 1/1 counters, and the opponent gets rad counters. Yeah, it's a 0/0. It'll just come out turn 4 when you swing with your commander, and then you're bashing face with a 3/3, a 5/5 flying. If they block it, they get rad counters. Still not sold. That's completely fine. Coastline Marauders. 0/3, 2 and a red. When it attacks, it gets +1/+0 for each land defending player controls. That thing will get huge. It also has trample. Still not sold. That's completely fine. I totally understand. Realm Seekers. 0/0. For 6, when it enters the battlefield, it enters with X11 counters on it, equal to the total number of cards in all players' hands. 2 and a green, remove a 1/1 counter from it, search your library for a land and put it into play tapped. If you're swinging turn 4, odds are people still have 5, 6, 7 cards in hand, and then you're getting this back as like a 20 plus, 20 plus, bashing face, and then if you do it late game, you have mana to remove the counters to get land. Oh, and there's more of these. Drakestown Forgotten, 4 and a black, 0/0, enters with a 1/1 equal to the number of creature cards in all graveyards. What about Towering Titan? Just a 0/0, enters with a 1/1 for the total amount of power on your board. Yeah, I read that right. Okay. This deck is aggressive as hell. And then guess what? We get to be really cheeky. There's 3 Feigned Death cards. I bring these up every deck video because I love Feigned Death cards. If you don't know what they are, how? I talk about them all the time. 1 black, target creature, when it dies, it doesn't die. It comes back. Now, how does that work with Gyrus? Because Gyrus will be a 0/0 if it comes back. Well, there's 3 of them that'll give Gyrus a +1/+1 buff when he comes back. Oh, and with all these 0 power cards in our graveyard, that's... wow, perfect. Feigned Death brings it back with a 1/1 counter. Not dead at all, brings it back with a Wicked Roll token. with a Wicked Roll aura attached to it. Undying Malice, 1/1 counter. And then we can swing with him again, get back the 0 drops that are huge, continue to bash face. And there's just so many ways to fill your grave in these colors too. We've got Life from the Loam, Golgari Grave Troll, Faithless Looting, Drown in Filth, Thrill of Possibilities, Old Stick Fingers. There's like, this deck might be a problem. Look at this old ass card, Clockwork Beast. Where else would you run this card? Nowhere. You don't run this anywhere else. This deck, he's a 0/0 that comes out with 7 1/1 counters. Y'all bash you for a quick 10 ski on turn 4. Just a quick 10 ski. I know what you're saying. Hey, Nick, why don't you just sack those creatures before they have to get exiled? Ashnod's Altar of Dementia. Especially Altar of Dementia. Especially Altar of Dementia.
Up next is Mizzix's Replica Rider with 281 decks. Mizzix's Replica Rider is an Izzet exile deck with a very fun ability and playstyle that's pretty unique. With only 281 decks on EDHREC, which is kind of shocking, which I guess is why it's on the list. At 4 and a red, this 4/5 flying Goblin Wizard, which are 2 really important creature types, allows us to pay 1 and a hybrid Izzet to copy a spell we've cast from anywhere other than our hand and choose a new copy. What's really cool is she can do permanents, so she's not just a Spellslinger deck. If it's a permanent, you copy it as a token, and it gains haste until end of turn, and you sack it at the end of your turn. If this was any other Izzet commander, it would not say permanent on it, so this is just very unique and cool. Shockingly low amount of decks. Everything you cast with your Commune with Lava, you know, you can copy it. Yeah, sure. Or just run something like Wild Mage Sorcerer in this deck, and it's like, hey, all my stuff has Cascade, and it copies. Sorry. Seems really good. Up next, we've got Lucius the Eternal. I didn't even see this guy. 367 decks on EDHREC. Lucius the Eternal is the most fitting name for a card I've ever seen, and is sitting at 367 decks on EDHREC. This Rakdos commander costs 3, a black and a red for a 5/3. He's an Astari's warrior with haste, and when Lucius dies, exile it and choose a creature an opponent controls. When that creature leaves the battlefield, return Lucius to the battlefield. This dude works great with the in addition to casting this spell, sack a creature spells like Annihilation Glare or Eaten Alive, which allows us to sacrifice Lucius as a part of the cost, choosing the creature we're about to kill with Lucius's ability, and then kill the creature with the spell at a cheap cost, getting back Lucius. It's super good. Attrition seems like it would be an absolute house in this deck, just an enchantment that lets you sack a creature to destroy a creature. That's pretty good. Along with fling cards just being hilarious. Again, criminally underrated for how fun this looks. A lot of different ways you could go, and you're running a bunch of fun style cards, so. Corvold Gleeful Glutton's kind of interesting. 710 decks. He's on the higher end of this list, but still under 1,000 is kind of shocking for me. I figured this guy would be built like a ton. Corvold Gleeful Glutton is a Jund Dragon Noble commander with 710 decks on EDHREC. Corvold is 5, a black, a red, and a green, but he reduces his cost by 1 for each permanent type you've sacrificed this turn. Coming out as a 4/4 flying trample haste, whenever Corvold deals combat damage to a player, put X/1/1 counters on him and draw X cards, where X is the number of permanent types among permanents in your graveyard. Yeah. Treasures. Clues. Blood. Food. Sorry, I got a nasty cough. On top of that, there's a ton of creatures, enchantments, artifacts, and lands that just crack themselves for value, make him cost less, make you draw more cards because they're in their graveyard now. He's a big, scary dragon. And I know 710 decks, you know, that's not a small amount of decks. But this definitely reads like it's a plus 1,000er. This just seems fun as hell. Yeah, go do it. I like him. Katsumasa the Animator is next with 350 decks. Katsumasa the Animator is a mono blue artifact deck with a very unique playstyle. With 350 decks on EDHREC, this Moonfolk Artificer costs 2 and 2 blue for a 3/3 flying. You can pay 2 and a blue until end of turn. Target non-creature artifact you control becomes an artifact creature and gains flying. If it's not a vehicle, its power and toughness are 1/1. At the beginning of your upkeep, put a 1/1 counter on each of up to 3 non-creature artifacts. Now, clearly, vehicles seem pretty okay, being able to animate them instead of crew them, but I really like this guy with, like, budget-efficient artifacts like Wellsprings, you know, that draw you a card or get you a mana when they enter or die, get their early game value, turn them into mid to late game threats with Katsumasa's +1/+1 and animation ability. If the threats get handled, you just get their death triggers. On top of vehicles and baubles, running the classic artifact interaction like Ethereum Sculptor and Emery Lurker of the Lock to just, like, spam out artifacts, get them back if they're dealt with, animate them, make them bigger, repeat. pretty good. Zarina, Dauntless General, is an Orzhov commander that's honestly more annoying than fun, which is a reoccurring theme with Orzhov commanders. But it has 70 freaking decks, so we'll go over it. Zarina is a 2/2 human soldier for 1 and a black. When she enters the battlefield, exile target player's graveyard, sacrifice Zarina, humans you control gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. On top of being a graveyard hate bear, you know, just hosing a graveyard deck when she enters, she is great protection for a wide human board state. You know, if someone does a board wipe, someone tries to remove something, she protects it very well. On top of that, pairing your own board wipe with her ability, you know, makes your board stay and then wipe everybody else's, which is a super good line of play to win. Going even deeper into this, throwing in some of those Feign Death cards would be super good because you could crack her, make your board indestructible, Feign Death her so she comes back. On top of all this annoying shit you could be doing, you also just have like a normal default human list, which has gotten a ton of support with stuff like Coppercoat Vanguard or Thalia's Lieutenant. So, you know, this deck just seems very annoying, resilient. Pretty good. Up next, we've got Huatli, Poet of Unity with 567 decks. Huatli, Poet of Unity is another typal commander to make this list with 567 decks on EDH Rec, which should say something because, you know, I really don't like typal decks really all that much, but she seems actually kind of fun. Huatli is 2 and a green for a 2/3 human warrior bard. When she enters the battlefield, search your library for a basic land card and put it into your hand, then shuffle. For 3 and 2 hybrid Boros, you can exile and return Huatli, transformed into Roar of the Fifth People, a saga whose first chapter gives us 2 2/2 green dinos. Second chapter lets our creatures tap for Naya colors, which is actually pretty good. Chapter 3 tutors us up a dino from our deck, you know, which is good in a dinosaur deck, I'm sure. While the final chapter gives our dinos double strike and trample, you know, which will end a game. This chick is mana fixing, mana ramp, board filling, a tutor, and a win con stapled onto your commander. You know, run your Gishaths and your Zakamas, whatever your weird dino stuff is, and have a blast. This seems real good. Hannah Ship's Navigator's up next. This one's an old school classic that has no love because it's only got 472 decks. Hannah Ship's Navigator is an old commander originally printed in Invasion, but reprinted recently that I feel has really fallen through the cracks over the years. With 472 decks on EDH Rec, for 1 a white and a blue, Hannah is a 1/2 human artificer. Pay 1 a white and a blue, tap her, return target artifact or enchantment card from your graveyard to your hand. She seems really fun, and she has a ton of support now, you know, with the inclusions of sagas. You know, they seem pretty good. Not to even mention the powerful ones that just came out in the Doctor Who set, like Trial of a Time Lord, and new really good vehicles that we've gotten, like Night Paladin, that Hannah can crew and then bring back if dealt with, which is really cool. On top of just tons of really good cards for her deck, like Oswald Fiddlebender, the Reality Chip. This seems like a really solid one, actually. Hansk Slayer Zealot. What a strange name. Hansk. Interesting. 407 decks. Hansk is the actual magic skin of like the Daryl Dixon card that came out. So that might be the explanation for why it's in so little decks. For 2 a red and a green, we get a 4/4 human archer. At the beginning of our upkeep, target opponent creates 3 2/2 black zombie tokens. Tap Hansk, deal 2 damage to any creature. Whenever a zombie an opponent controls dies, draw a card. This is super interesting play. This is a super interesting play style that's actually really good. Slightly political, as you get to pick who gets zombies. Also a bit group huggy, as you could just be giving them to everybody. Hansk dealing 2 to a creature is great because we can deal with some of the zombies and get a card draw, as well as like 1,000-year elixir in this deck, so you can get 2 Hansk triggers or activations. Seems really good. But what I thought is like Anger of the Gods and stuff like that does 2 damage to everybody's board, because Hansk will live it, all of his zombies won't, and then you'll draw a ton of cards for 3 mana. This actually is probably going to be one I build. This looks very fun. Or you can just run mass goad cards like Disrupt Decorum and just have opponents swinging at each other with zombies that draw you cards if they die. It's pretty good. And finally, we've got Garzazal Plague Queen with 82 decks. Garzazal is a Grixis commander, coming in at 4 colorless, a blue, a black, and a red for a 5/5 flying. She's a vampire, and whenever a creature dealt damage by Garzazal dies, put a 1/1 counter on Garzazal. And when she deals combat damage to a player, we draw a card. Her deck is honestly just a vampire deck. If you look it up on EDH Rec, that's all it recommends you, but I disagree. I'm going to be honest. There's one big reason this deck seems really fun, and that's because of this deck's best card for me, and that's Chandra's Ignition. Target this with Chandra's Ignition, wipe most of the board, even if it's a 5/5. Wipe most of the board for 5, deal 5 to each opponent, put a +1/+1 counter on her for each creature that died, because Chandra's Ignition makes the creature deal the damage. Have a huge flying vampire beater. And, you know, that's not even it, because this is where it gets really scary. The fact we're in Grixis, we have access to Is It, so we have pretty much all of the copy target instant or sorcery shenanigans. So, you know, you play that on your Chandra's Ignition, and then the copy targets the way bigger Garza, or the original, sorry. The original Chandra's Ignition targets the way bigger Garza, and then it does a lot more damage to each opponent. The creatures are already gone, but you're going to be dealing a good 10 to 15 plus damage on the 5 you already did. You can do upwards of 20 plus damage with Chandra's Ignition and Garza, and that's if there's a small to medium amount of creatures on the board. If you're against a token deck, you could probably kill everybody, which is really good. And on that same note, I'm sure there's a play pattern and a way to build this deck that's built around cards kind of like that, where this could get really scary. Outside of that, she's just a high-costed Voltron commander. You'll need to protect her, but you're in Grixis, so you got plenty of protection to do that. Again, you can run the Death Defy cards if you don't want to waste mana on her. If someone deals with her, you can get her